Since being elevated to chairman, Mr. Ryder is exercising his privilege of being ex officio member and isn't here. But we'll see him later on today.
So noted.
So noted. Also, let me please advise everyone that this meeting is being broadcast over the internet, and I guess that means we should behave accordingly. Just a couple of brief words in my report, and then we'll move right into the agenda. First, I want to thank the Facilities Approval Task Force, particularly Elaine and Susan and Gary, for their work, and also the work groups that Gary assembled and put together from among the facility experts from our institutions. Today, we're going to have some, well, you've seen some changes to date already in the briefing sheets and the presentations. But we're also going to see some recommendations today that represent the final work by that task force under item 2G, and also some changes in progress that you'll be seeing over the next couple of board meetings. Secondly, one of the things that task force recommended was to begin a process of looking at our institution's master plans over a 5-year rotating basis. And I want to thank Chancellor Lee Jackson for being here as our guinea pig, the first one out of the chute, to present University of North Texas 3 campus master plans a little later this morning under item 2D. That, along with the mapping tool that we'll begin using at some point in the new year, after we collect all the zip codes, are designed to help us look at the individual facilities we're asked to approve in context with the entire institution's master plan and in context with what the state's inventory is, if you will, so we can kind of see the big picture, not just each individual discrete project. With that, that concludes my remarks, and we'll move to agenda item 2B, which is approval of the minutes from our September 15th meeting, and I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Have a motion from Mr. Hinton, a second.
Second.
Second from Elaine. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. I know that means everyone read the minutes in detail.
In detail.
Item 2C is our consent agenda. This was a recommendation, a previous recommendation from the Facilities Approval Task Force. The items on the consent agenda are 2 of the projects before the committee: Texas A&M University Commerce and the University of Texas El Paso's Swimming and Fitness Center. Are there any objections to?
That's what Bill is coming over to tell me.
Okay. Our ever alert general counsel has pointed out that Mr. Hinton is not a member of this committee, and as much as he wanted to get through this agenda, we need somebody else to move approval of the minutes.
I'll move.
Okay. Lynn moves and Elaine still seconds.
I'm still, well, I don't know. Still second.
I'm new at this chair in the committee stuff.
I thought this was a full-fledged meeting. Board.
You seem so authoritative when you did it.
No one doubts Joe.
Any questions about the consent calendar? If not, the chair will entertain a motion from somebody besides Joe Hinton to approve the consent calendar.
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Brenda.
Second, Mr.
Second by Lynn. Thank you. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right. Well, that brings us to one of the 2 more interesting things on the agenda, and that is Chancellor Jackson.
Mr. Chairman. See, is the clicker working yet? No? Okay.
I think this has been handed out to the committee members. Is this reflective of what you're going to be presenting? Or
That's a part of the UNT campus's background material. Mr. Chairman and members, I am Lee Jackson, the Chancellor of the UNT system, and with me Dr. Gretchen Bataille, the President of the University of North Texas, and Dr. John Price, the Vice Chancellor of our UNT Dallas campus. I apologize on behalf of Dr. Scott Ransom of the UNT Health Science Center in Fort Worth. You may have heard they had a tragic loss of a student this week. Today is the funeral service and the memorial in Fort Worth, so he apologizes. Our goal is to give you a quick 20-minute view of the campus master plans, maybe from a broader perspective than your project review allows you, and to give you a picture of where we think we are and where we're going.
Lee, if I can interrupt you, would you pull your mic a little bit closer so the whole audience can hear you better? Thank you.
Surely. When I arrived in 2002, we had some fantastic legacy assets on our campuses, but master planning was, from my point of view, not being done in a first-rate way. Now we have, with the Board of Regents' support, a 5-year rolling capital plan, and they look at it every single quarterly board meeting to match all known and foreseeable revenues with all priority identified capital projects, and to make sure the two stay in balance. Any change in funding for prospective land acquisition has to come out of an existing project to balance that 5-year plan. And we also immediately in 2003 began the process of master planning. We retained Sasaki and Associates, a prominent national firm. They were selected in competition both in Denton and in Dallas. We had the support of the Communities Foundation of Texas, a $500,000 grant that enabled us to invest in the future planning for our Dallas campus in a way that we wouldn't have otherwise been able to do out of cash flow. So we did that project entirely with private and donated funds. And in Fort Worth, a separate competitive review selected an equally fine group of firms led by what is now Jacobs and Associates, and came up with an excellent Fort Worth master plan. So we'll start with Denton to give you a picture of the UNT campus and its growth and trends. Dr. Bataille.
Thank you. I'm Gretchen Bataille. I'm in my 3rd year as president of the UNT campus in Denton. And as many of you probably know, that campus was founded in 1890 above a hardware store in downtown Denton, and this fall we have nearly 35,000 students. This is the 8th consecutive year that we have had enrollment growth. I guess am I shaking my head? Oh, I'm trying to figure out where the person, there, are you doing it? Okay, great. Although founded as a school for teachers with strengths in music and the visual arts, UNT has a 21st century approach to research and economic development needs of the state of Texas. Our master plan that the Chancellor already referenced looks at our main campus, which has, along with Discovery Park and our Eagle Point campus, over 900 acres. And we're guided by the principles of design, sustainability, and service to the state. But in our strategic plan, we are also guided by 3 principles: collaboration, diversity, and internationalization. I'm not on that slide yet, but that's okay. I will make a few comments about, we were the first public university to sign the President's climate commitment, and we are reducing our carbon footprint, and we have a sustainability council. So we're looking at our master plan from many directions. We are increasing the number of bike paths and bike racks. We're partnering with DCTA in Denton so that all of our students and faculty and staff have free bus service throughout campus to Discovery Park and to Dallas. We are increasingly a residential campus, and we have opened 2 new residence halls, Honors Hall and Traditions Hall. Okay, now we're on the immediate future slide, the next one. Thank you. This gives you a sense of where we're going. The Business Leadership Building, funded by TRBs in part, but also by donor funds, has selected an architect. It will be constructed using LEED standards, anticipating that we will get silver LEED certification for that building. The Life Sciences Complex has already broken ground, and that has been funded with HEAF and internal funding. So we really are looking at a variety of funding sources to carry out the master plan that we have. We anticipate that that building will be a minimum silver LEED and perhaps gold. We're working toward gold because our board just approved a cistern that will collect water to be used for irrigation that will really push us, we think, over the edge there. We will be going to the legislature this year requesting TRB funding for the College of Visual Arts and Design. Our College of Visual Arts and Design is the largest in the state of Texas. We produce half of the certified teachers of art in the state of Texas, and the faculty there have no problem getting jobs, whether it's in fashion design, merchandising, graphic design, or teaching. The main campus, and this is just a shot down the Library Mall, which is really, I have to say, the heart of the campus. The library houses the Texas Digital Library, which complements the recent move of the Texas State Historical Association to the Denton campus. We have a number of new academic programs and many changes. Our School of Library and Information Sciences became the College of Information Library Science and Technologies on October 1st and moved out to Discovery Park, which is our research park. The Frank W. and Sue Mayborn School of Journalism is pending approval from your board. We are planning programs in aviation management and aeronautical operations, in marketing and logistics, and technical linguistics and technical communications is now a separate department. Donor funds were used for this mall, and donor funds have established the Anshel Brusillo Endowed Chair in the College of Music. A grant from the Murchison Foundation is supporting scholarships for transfer students who will teach math and science. We also were fortunate that we received $1.4 million plus $1 million challenge grant to establish Teach North Texas, or TNT, as we like to call it, modeled on the UTeach program. So we're very excited about that. Finally, it's important to note that our students don't all take advantage of our beautiful campus because we are the largest provider of online credits in Texas, and many students take advantage of our strengths in online learning through our next-gen courses. I mentioned Discovery Park. It is our research park. We have established long-term research areas in art and music, but to be honest, those are not research areas that garner federal funds, and often when one looks at a research campus, they're looking at federal funds. So we have really complemented those areas with increases in science, engineering, and technology funding. We reallocated $25 million to support 6 research clusters, internal reallocation. We hired a director for Discovery Park, which will be an economic engine for the region and an incubator for cutting-edge science. We hired our first National Academy of Engineering professor this year, and he is also a member of the American Academy of Arts and Science. Our research funding increased 15.2% last year, and we had 16 faculty last year who received federal grants of $1 million or more. Eagle Point is home to the Athletic Center, to Victory Hall, one of our residence halls, and the proposed stadium and entertainment complex that will include a hotel and convention center. This will be an area, you can see it on the map, that is the gateway to UNT at the intersection of I-35, and this will be the first college stadium that will be LEED certified. The architect is the same as that for the Cowboys' new stadium, but I have to tell you, we will not have the cost overruns that are anticipated with that stadium. UNT paid off the Athletic Center only 3 years after opening it, and we're very proud that UNT ranked first in the nation on the Penn State Gender Equity Scorecard. You are aware of what's happening in the state. We are aware, and I know that it is a challenge for all of us. This slide shows the projected growth of 18 to 24-year-olds by region, and as you see, the most rapid growth for every demographic group is in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and 75% of that growth will be Hispanic students. What I want to tell you is that UNT is ready for that growth. We are in the top 50 universities in the country for the number of African American and Hispanic graduates. We have over 4,000 Hispanic students, over 4,000 African American students. There are only 10 other universities in the entire United States that can boast these numbers, only one other in Texas, and that's the University of Houston. Our Emerald Eagle Scholars are over 700 students whose family income is $40,000 or less, and they are beneficiaries of free tuition and fees for 4 years, but only if they maintain a 2.5 GPA and take 30 credit hours every year on the path to graduating in 4 years. Of that first class of Emerald Eagle Scholars last year, 82% of them returned for their sophomore year. That is an incredible retention rate for any school and for any group of students, but particularly for students who are first generation, poor, and didn't expect to be able to go to college in the first place. We received a $1.9 million Title III grant for student success, and that too is providing additional programming to ensure that our students are on track to graduate. We continue to have the greatest number of transfer students in the state of Texas, in large part because of the articulation agreements that we have with community colleges and because the Institute for the Study of Transfer Students is on our campus. That is a very quick overview of the relationship between buildings, master plan, and master planning that's going on at UNT. I'm very proud of where we've gone in the 2.5 years I've been here, and I anticipate that it's just going to get better and better. Thank you for the opportunity to share this with you.
Thank you.
We look forward to your questions later, obviously. Dr. Price?
The UNT Dallas campus is located at 7300 Houston School Road in Dallas. It sits on a 264-acre site, a very beautiful site on a hilltop overlooking the city of Dallas. Accessible from I-20 to the south, I-35 to the north. The ultimate build-out on this campus is somewhere between 25,000 to 30,000 students. The master plan for UNT Dallas is a master plan for the 21st century. It is a model master plan for new universities in terms of higher education delivery, campus design, community partnerships, and environmental stewardship. UNT Dallas will be Dallas's first public university within the city limits of Dallas. Our growth at Dallas has been remarkable, I believe. We currently sit at 2,212 students in head count, 959 students in FTE. Our goal of reaching 1,000 FTE students is at hand. We anticipate opening the University of North Texas in Dallas by the fall semester of 2010. We estimate that the growth of that campus will go to 16,000 head counts by the year of 2030. Currently, this is the inaugural building for our campus that we opened in January of 2007. Previously, we were located at 8915 Houston School Road in a business park. And since moving to this campus, our growth has been spurred because we have more of a campus and university environment. It is a 75,000 square foot building, but there is no lab space available in this building. And currently, we have no additional spaces for faculty and staff additions. As you enter the campus from Houston School Road, which is the main entrance point for the new university, to your left sits the site of our first building. To your left is the site of our first building. To the right will be the location of our second building. That second building is needed in order to have lab spaces that I mentioned earlier, additional offices for our faculty and staff. We also have a Dallas Police Institute, a $9.5 million grant to the campus. The Dallas Police Institute, however, is currently located at the headquarters of the Dallas Police Department and ultimately will move to our campus in this second building. The second building will also office our Office of College Readiness and Academic Success, and the second building, of course, will give us needed classroom space for continued growth and development of the campus. We're very excited about an early college high school initiative that we just entered this fall with the Dallas Independent School District and Cedar Valley College as our partners. AT&T gave us a $1 million grant in order to establish a unit for college readiness and academic success and to provide scholarships for the students that will graduate from this early college high school program. As you know, the early college high school program allows students to complete high school and the equivalent of an associate's degree at the end of a 4-year period so that they can then transfer to a higher education institution and complete a 4-year degree, having done all of this over a 6-year span. This, of course, greatly helps contain the costs of education and also shortens the time period for earning a 4-year degree. UNT Dallas at full development in terms of the principle of the master plan that I previously spoke of is shown on this slide. The early college high school is currently located at a temporary site, but will be located at a site adjacent to our property at UNT Dallas. You can also see that by 2018 we will have a DART light rail line coming to our campus, which will immensely enhance access to education for the citizens of Dallas and will be a tremendous boom for our enrollment growth at the campus.
Before we leave that slide, John, I should point out the Dallas Independent School District held a bond election and approved funding, and they are preparing to build this early college high school. So that's not a state-funded project, nor is it one that's off in the distance. It will be under construction in the next year.
UNT Dallas will be a niche university responding to the education and workforce needs of our region. We will do a limited amount of programs, but we will do them very well. Our emphasis will be in education, business, information technology, the life sciences, and public and human services. We have graduated over 600 students that have completed the majority of their coursework at the UNT Dallas campus. These students have graduated from the University of North Texas, having completed the majority of their coursework at the UNT Dallas campus since its inception. Our philanthropic support for the campus has also been tremendous, and we are excited about the bringing of UNT Dallas online in 2010 because we know it is going to be a tremendous boost for helping to increase the high school graduation rates, the college going rates, and ultimately the college completion rates. That concludes my presentation.
All right, I'm going to fill in for Dr. Ransom to take you through these Health Science Center slides. The most important note is that the campus at the Health Science Center in Fort Worth doubled in size in the last 3 years with the acquisition of this additional land. So the old osteopathic hospital closed, the property was sold, we added 15 acres to our campus, maintained our focus on the 4 colleges that train doctors, physician assistants, graduate biomedical science, and an increased level of research throughout the campus. This is the overlay of what we started looking at when we did the master plan. Obviously, the acquisition of the 15 acres, that's the western part of this slide, it was the new land, gave us an opportunity to look at it as a campus for the first time. That vertical spine is Montgomery Street. It historically divided the hospital and its parking garage and facilities from the medical school and the growing number of buildings east of Montgomery. So we asked our Jacobs team to plan a master plan bringing those 2 parts of the property together. And this is the final master plan, has been approved by our Board of Regents. We had a really great community task force with Fort Worth civic and business leaders along with our faculty and students. They came up with a plan with some similar themes to those you heard at UNT to take a look for the first time at the pedestrian focus so that students and faculty could actually get back and forth across the campus from classroom buildings to library to research facilities. They also found a lack of student services and proposed something like a student union or a building with more localized services and a major improvement to Montgomery Street to make it more of a centerpiece of the campus. The first phase of planning for the Health Science Center campus includes the TRB-funded Building A, which is largely a classroom and office building. It includes larger class sizes. The medical school class is already scheduled to grow from 170 students to 240 or 250 per year. We don't have classrooms that large. It also has public health classrooms. The osteopathic medical hospital that was on the north end of this property has already been demolished. The parking garage is being retained, and then as we build it out, we will build the open space and the connectors back to the main campus. So that's the drawing of Building A, currently on its way to construction and is funded. In the future, a Phase 2 will take us back to the east side of the campus. We have one highly successful research building. I've outgrown it. It originally was built with about 3 or 4 floors of shell space. Those have now been fully programmed, and so in the future we'll be asking for a research building on the east side of the campus, and this drawing suggests that we're going to redo our parking lot. We have a significant part of this part of the campus that is open surface parking, and we want to put in a more environmentally friendly open space with covered parking as possible. So that is the overview of the Health Science Center, both their enrollment growth and research growth and continued test scores of graduating students have shown steady improvement. We're very proud of their growth. Let me bring this back then to a system overview and give you some conclusions of the region and how the UNT system seeks to serve the region. We do have 4 locations, 2 existing campuses, one, the Dallas campus, we believe on its way through steady growth to becoming a campus, and the downtown site that I've talked to this board about several times that is not scheduled ever to become a university campus, but it is a successful extension, outreach, and teaching site for us. A lot has changed in the face of downtown Dallas since we first came and talked to the coordinating board about this site. The City of Dallas made a selection for a major downtown park, and it happened to end up across the street from the university's center site, and this work is already underway. They've demolished all the buildings, they've scraped this block, they're putting in place the park. It's as if they've created a space for our students to throw frisbees before we even have that many students. But they've certainly made it a fantastically different part of downtown, and we're excited about our location. To the left is the University Center with its 2 halves. Before you at the end of the park is the Dallas Municipal Building that we have projected for our College of Law. I know there are different opinions about the College of Law, but you will understand we're moving ahead and planning, should the legislature approve this, to implement temporary teaching in the University Center at Dallas, but to move into the former municipal building as soon as it can be renovated. The City Council of Dallas approved $16 million this summer to start the renovations of the municipal building, and they are entering into an MOU with us to make that building available. So they're investing city money, anticipating that the state will do so. We finally took ownership of the Teiches building, we call it the UCD, just in August of 2008. It was a very complicated negotiation on a building that's been in place almost 100 years, has underlying property owners, has deed restrictions, but that finally did take place, and we're excited about the opportunities inside the building. It's more and more active every day. We have more and more administrative meetings in the upper floors, but the downstairs lobby is filled with students in a very successful charter school. The universities who are active there, particularly A&M Commerce and UNT, are teaching more and more courses every semester, pretty significant growth rates this fall. And we have a number of programs with the Dallas Independent School District. Several of these photographs are of our college-bound programs. Students come in and use the computer lab during the day, working with counselors, talking about the college admission process. They do job shadowing. We have professionals in the Dallas business community come into the building and meet with middle school and high school students in a mentoring job shadowing format. I want to come back and close sort of talking about this theme that Dr. Bataille mentioned about regional growth. We know that you have some uncomfortable numbers when you look at the Closing the Gaps goals and you look at all the campuses in the state's current projections of enrollment. Even with the pretty significant enrollment growth rates that UNT is on track to achieve in Denton, even with the most ambitious growth trends at our Dallas campus, we believe that those 2 campuses, for example, will take 10, 15, maybe 18,000 students in the next decade and virtually lead the state in growth rate. But when you look at this chart, you see that the challenge is that our region actually has the highest growth of college-age students, 18 to 24. The existing growth rates of our 2 major undergraduate campuses alone won't completely address that need. There are other universities in the region. They're all projecting growth, and still it doesn't meet closing the gaps, particularly for Hispanic students. I wish I could come today and tell you that there is an obvious answer. We expect growth at all of our locations. We do have very successful online education, as Dr. Bataille mentioned. and we're looking and talking about ways to market better. Some of the initial online education has been focused in graduate education. There's going to have to be some breakthroughs in undergraduate education and the way we market degree programs. Many online students are full-time enrolled students who take a course here and there for convenience. Marketing degrees that are largely or more fully online is a different challenge, and one that we look forward to working on. There will be more opportunities for early college high schools. We have a very successful network of community colleges in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and that will be a part of the answer. I will tell you on this fourth bullet, we've had at least 2, maybe 3 discussions, feelers, initiatives from locations in and around the Dallas-Fort Worth area where there's significant population growth, and either major land developers, major employers, city governments, community colleges want the University of North Texas system to come and talk about creating teaching campuses. If we can find sites that make sense economically, where we can feasibly support faculty dedicated to those locations, I think we'll be as aggressive as we can be in the region in meeting regional needs. None of those discussions, let me emphasize the word none of those discussions to date have suggested the need for or the proposal for another independent university in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. We have no such plans. UNT's business school is now teaching business courses in Frisco and Collin County, one of the highest growth regions of the state. That's a great partnership, using a high school at night in Frisco. I hope there are 20 more like that. That makes sense. There's a student demand, and with our size and scope, we're able to respond to that demand. The last bullet here is not directly related, except that in a high-growth region, I wanted to make you aware of a discussion that I have now. Every time we talk about a building project, every time we do a master plan, the engineers, the architects, and the planners come back to us with some pretty bold ideas in the energy area, and most of the time, those ideas have to be scaled back or left on the table. There's really not a way for us to approach, for example, a $50 million massive power plant project for one of our campuses without taking it out of the TRB that's being designed. So we make some accommodations for future growth. We don't make the kind that I think we probably should. We're going to talk about a grant opportunity where we can actually look to get some help in planning how we would both plan them and fund them. But there really is not a place in the current space funding model, in my opinion, to look at what's happening in energy and sustainability and new technologies and new energy sources. So we build in capacity where we can. I think we're not approaching it probably the way the private sector would if they had campuses comparable to ours. And as I was inspired this week by hearing Mayor Will Wynn of here in Austin talk about the City of Austin's commitment to providing energy in downtown to commercial developers with an incentive. But they found a way to make it work on a pretty massive scale, similar to what some campuses have done. We're looking to try to find a way to do that, and I just wanted to emphasize to you that it's one of the challenges in capital planning. That is the overview, and we're here to take questions. I would also say if we didn't cover anything today, I hope you'll use this as a learning occasion so that the next university system, you can give them a template of exactly what to talk about.
Chancellor, I have to commend you and Drs. Price and Batal for a great presentation. You compressed a lot of good information into 20 minutes there, and we appreciate it. And it being a good presentation, I suspect there may be some questions, and so I'd like to offer the Commissioner or fellow board members an opportunity to ask some questions. I know I have a few.
Well, I have a comment, and I guess there's a question embedded in it. I'm very pleased to see that you really have a systematic development strategy for the institution. Denton being your residential campus and being your center for research and economic development, and then creating 2 urban centers, urban institutions that have a somewhat different character because of their location and the mission. I remember when we had your first presentation about your development at the downtown center, we talked about outreach activities and talked about making sure that that the downtown center as well as UNT Dallas played a central role in helping to improve educational attainment in Dallas, particularly inner city Dallas, because we know that there are some significant challenges there. My one question is, and I guess John, this is for you. What about education programs? What are your plans for teacher preparation programs or professional development programs for teachers? Once again, with the focus on improving educational attainment in Central Dallas.
Well, education and majors in teacher education is probably the largest program that we currently have in Dallas. You may be aware that the Meadows Foundation recently gave us a $500,000 grant to help strengthen that program with a specific emphasis on educational leadership in our Masters of Educational Administration with Principal Certification, emphasis on that. And so with that education program, the things we're doing in education administration with teacher certification, we are developing that as a part of our college readiness and academic success program that's going to be headed up by Gloria Bahamon to work with the college districts in order to encourage more students to go into teaching as a career. In addition to that, Texas Instrument gave us a $1 million grant, $1.1 million grant in order to attract more students into mathematics, and we've had some very good successes with that program. In fact, by the spring semester, we hope to have all of the slots available in that program fully subscribed. That program pays full tuition and fees for the students that are in that program, and it gives them book allowance in addition to that. And so we have some very exciting things going on in that area. I expect that teacher education will be one of our top programs at the Dallas campus, and we will do all that we can to contribute to more individuals going into teaching as a profession.
Well, we're the staff at the coordinating board is planning to recommend to the board that teacher education, particularly in math and science at the secondary school level, be one of the 2 or 3 highest priorities for the board over the next couple of years. Assuming that the board approves that strategic goal, we look forward to working with you, because obviously Dallas is the perfect laboratory to really develop new approaches to teacher education, with a particular focus on the changing demographics of Dallas and Texas in general. So,
absolutely. We look forward to working with you on that as well.
Great.
And I was as a follow-up to the commissioner's question, and I was curious whether there had been any consideration of the urban, the downtown center as a potential extension teaching site.
It is a teaching site. That's one of the 3 focuses. We have some administrative offices. We do the outreach, but it really started 15 years ago as a collaborative teaching site for a number of universities in the region. Now, some of those universities have other sites now. In fact, I think Dr. Stewart is here to talk about her exciting project. But for A&M Commerce and UNT in particular, UT Arlington to some degree, there are still active programs. The enrollment has grown. UNT's made a renewed commitment, and I think had something like a 200% growth in student enrollment at the UCD as an extension of the Denton campus.
What is the ultimate capacity of that downtown campus as a teaching site?
Well, there are 8 floors. 4 of them were renovated with a local tax increment district, not with state funds. Those 4 floors are pretty fully subscribed at night. It's one of those interesting sites. If you come in the day, we rent it out for corporate training, meetings, all sorts of things during the day. But at night, the classrooms are now on those 4 floors pretty full. The upper 4 floors were a department store, and they're big, empty warehouse floors with nothing in them, which is both great and it's a challenge. It's about a $15 million building code hit to go above the 4th floor. You have to upgrade your elevators, your heating, air conditioning, water, sprinkler, and we haven't yet found the package of programs to support that $15 million upgrade to use the other half of the building. But long term, Mr. Chairman, and answer your question. As UNT's deans get excited about downtown Dallas, and some of them now are, in business, in the arts, in music, and other areas, they've come and talked to us about programs they might want to grow at a downtown location. When we have enough of those, then we'll have the synergy to be able to finance, we hope, the improvement of the other half of the building.
We did accept the challenge from Commissioner Paredes to have more teacher education courses taught there. We do have business, we have graphic arts and design. We have a small museum there that's sponsored by our College of Visual Arts and Design. And we are teaching journalism, did I mention that? And continuing to increase the numbers there to meet the needs, often of adults coming back to school, sometimes younger students, but many of these are adults coming back to school who can't drive to Denton.
Oil and gas accounting started this fall with 2 classes because of the proximity of so many accounting firms and others in the downtown area.
Well, the Center for Achievement and Lifelong Learning is doing a lot of credit courses there as well.
Yeah, the programs all sound like they're meeting good demand. I hear an entrepreneurial bent to the programs that you're putting into that facility. Other questions from the committee members or board members?
If not, could I ask one question?
Sure.
As you said, you're one of the largest, probably the largest provider of online courses. One thing that we've talked about at the staff level is our space model and how the state space model might be changed or should be changed, or whether it should be changed with large increases in online courses, especially, I know at UNT one time you had an unusually large number of students who actually didn't step on campus out of your online courses. Well, that, of course, presents different demands, and we were wondering, at least I was wondering, if you've learned anything in terms of what types of resources are needed that might differ when you serve that type of student population, how we might want to consider that in any future changes in the space model. And then I guess the second piece of that is the question you raised, Chancellor, in terms of the energy issues, if you have any particular suggestions.
Well, that's a great question, and the issue of online courses combined with what we were looking at over the summer with the cost of gasoline caused us to really rethink a lot of what we're doing in terms of making more maximum use of our facilities. We actually talked with a lot of deans about Saturday classes, which of course students would hate to think about, but nevertheless it does make better use of facilities. A lot of our next gen courses meet on campus only 2 days a week, and the third class meeting is online, so that saves them having to come to class, but then what it does is have an empty room. And so I think a full look at the space model is really important, because the online courses, they're not necessarily cheaper, there's just a different kind of cost. The development cost, keeping them updated, ensuring that we have faculty or graduate students online in the chat rooms and to be able to answer student questions and have that feeling of being connected with the course and the campus and the faculty member is really important. You don't just stick it up there and expect they're going to come and take their course. And so it's a different kind of expense, and it does affect the kind of space we need.
That's an interesting remark, because I wondered, whether you needed the same, amount of facilities, but I also worried about the development cost, and, too often there seems to be few resources available for the development of those courses, and so that wouldn't necessarily show in the space model, but might need to show elsewhere.
Absolutely.
There have been some states, I think, that have looked at this pretty seriously, because your first thought, of course, is the more students who take online courses, the fewer buildings you need, therefore you ought to pay for these courses differently. One thing I would say, the last time I looked in detail at our online courses, except in the master's program in library science, where we do have some students really all around the world who are taking a series of courses that are very, very objective, not subjective, and can be delivered in that methodology. Most of the other programs are not all online, and most of the students, a high percentage of them in other programs outside library science, also take on-campus, in-person courses. They may simply not have to come up on Tuesday night, so they're cutting one trip a week or making it more convenient. The second thing these other state studies have found is there's a significant technology investment in supporting this. You know, it sounds like your laptop at home, you just log on and it's easy. From the university's point, there's not only training, there's capacity, there is the web software by which faculty members interact with the students, sometimes 30 at a time, as they have an interactive activity, editing documents, grading papers, providing 24-hour turnaround on all their scores and so forth. And so there's a significant support work that goes on just to train individual faculty members. The more and more who start using it, the more support there is. So there is a separate set of costs. And of course, the minute you start talking about changing and having a two-tier or separate funding recognition of the space, you then are reducing the incentive to go more and more and use the online technology unless you incorporate all these technology classes. One area we're looking at, frankly, a lot more is video conferencing. With these 4 sites that I showed on the regional map this summer, both for cost and literally the physical impossibility of having spur-of-the-moment meetings among our 4 locations, we've tested some technologies that are much better than they were before, where for relatively low expense you can have pretty good interactive video capacity added to your desktop computers and meet with almost anybody in your system pretty readily. I encourage you to look at it for the coordinating board. If it makes sense for us in the region, it has to make sense statewide, where people come in for a 1-hour meeting, and boy, if you stop and add up those costs, it's pretty significant.
Is that a hint for future committee structure? And
I was being subtle. No, it wasn't a hint about today's meeting. We're delighted to be here.
Lee's never subtle.
We're delighted to be here today, but it's all those other meetings.
Yeah, okay. We understand. Kind of as a follow-up, one of my questions, you mentioned, Gretchen, that your campus in Denton is becoming increasingly residential. I was curious what percentage of your student body in Denton is residential versus commuting, and then if you knew what percentage of your online credit hours were taken by each of those two segments, if you will.
Well, I don't think I can answer the second part of that question. We have about 6,000 students living on campus now, and actually our residence halls, usually in the spring, capacity goes down somewhat. In fact, we're going to be full again in the spring. We have a 15% increase in applications for admission for the spring, which is also phenomenal because it usually doesn't happen that way. We have a reputation as a commuter campus. I think it's a ill-defined term in some ways because our students live in Louisville and Sanger and around the region. They don't think of themselves as commuters. They just think of themselves as living at home or in an apartment and coming to school, because the majority of our students really do live in that region, whether they live on campus or in an apartment.
And yeah, that was really 6,000 on campus, but in my question in terms of percentage residential is, how many live in apartments that are within, 20 minutes?
15,000 in Denton.
Yeah.
So those 6,000 are largely freshmen. Very high percentage of our on-campus slots, and that's a pretty good percentage of our freshman class.
So it's good to be a landlord in Denton.
Well, there was a time when the university took the position, you can understand it, that if the market would respond, Texas was growing, there were a lot of people willing to build apartments, we didn't have to build residence halls. I don't know how that worked when we had 10,000 students. What we found was at 30,000 students, it had some drawbacks. It meant that a lot of your student activity, student services, student life was handicapped. Those students were off at the swimming pool 2 miles down the road and were not as likely to be involved in student government or other activities. So we're looking for a different balance. We are now building residence halls pretty steadily as our freshman class has grown so that we can change that balance.
Well, part of it also has to do with the best learning living environment for students. So we have some faculty living in residence halls. We have living and learning communities in the residence halls. We have a lot more activities going on in the evenings and on weekends and engaging students to really have the full college experience if they're there and if they're able to do that. We know not all students can do that, but for those who can, we want to be sure they have a rich environment so that they stay around the campus.
I was also curious for Dr. Price, what the timeline on your second building is, and also what the distance between your campus and the downtown facility is.
distance between our campus and downtown, I guess, is about 15 miles, I would imagine.
16, I think.
15, 16 miles. On the second building timeline, if the stars are perfectly aligned and everything goes just right, we hope to start breaking ground on the second building sometime in the summer of 2009, with occupancy no later than the end of December in 2010.
Well, this committee's done enough projects to know when he says we hope to break ground in '09, that doesn't mean we hope TRBs are approved in '09, because obviously that wouldn't allow you to break ground immediately. We've done something that I know other systems have done, but it's really the first time we've done it for this building on the Dallas campus. We have advanced our own funds internally to select an architectural firm to do the programming, to make sure we have the exact space need, and to do the design. We're that convinced that this building is overdue and needed, and we're prepared. Those plans will obviously sit on the shelf if there's no funding, but the building is needed, and we're designing it. We're doing some of the same type of work, similar precedent setting, on the stadium project that Dr. Bataille mentioned in Denton.
What is the timeline? Because that project was a new stadium, a convention center, and a hotel, all in one complex.
Well, they're all in one place, but they're sort of going down complementary paths. The stadium referendum was passed by the students to assess themselves a fee beginning in 2011 that would pay for approximately half, or no more than half, based on Texas law, of the stadium, and so the other half has to be raised from donors because we can't use state funds. The hotel, the Radisson Hotel that we purchased, we are working now with commercial firms that are giving us their best proposals for a hotel and convention center and parking garage that would be a complex that would be done by an external builder with cooperation and a lot of partnership with the City of Denton for the convention center. I mean, we see this as an entertainment, academic, athletic space. Our hospitality management program will be engaged with the hotel and convention center. So there are a lot of complementary factors going into this entire complex.
Those two pieces are complementary, but they're not codependent.
they're not,
on the,
right.
yeah.
If for any reason the stadium, well, they're going to move on their own schedules. When the financing is ready, when we have the right hotel proposal with the right financing, and it is private financing, city may be a participant, they'll move on their own schedules.
You mentioned, my last question is about LEED certification. Certainly, being in part of the construction industry, we've seen the tipping point passed where LEED certification and green building are, really pretty much the rule of thumb rather than the exception today. But I am curious whether the system has given any thought to studying the cost-benefit ratio of the LEED certification in general, and then specifically as you graduate to higher and higher levels of certification.
We absolutely have. We have looked at how long will it take to pay off what it costs to get LEED certification, and we believe that it makes a lot more sense to go through that process. We recognize that a lot of institutions are doing LEED kind of certified buildings without actually getting the certification. I think it sends a message to our communities and to our students if we actually go through the process, and it also sort of checks what happens when people say, oh, well, we don't really have to do that. And so we are committed to all of our major buildings being LEED certified at a minimum silver.
And I think, I'm not sure how much our staff is aware of those studies or, whether we're gathering some of the same information, but going back to, Chancellor, to your challenge about how do we fund energy projects, and I think this is sometimes applicable also to communication facilities, but it would be interesting to see the results of y'all's cost-benefit studies on LEED certification and sharing that data among institutions to look at the return on investment. Because while the upfront cost is higher, if the energy savings are there, if it makes our campuses more efficient, then we want to be good stewards. And so
Absolutely.
Sharing best practices. And we will take up the challenge or the idea of, how do we tackle these power plant or energy efficiency projects that affect, entire campuses and capacity and cost for the future. I think that was a great point. It's a more difficult thing to navigate funding in TRBs.
Well,
It's hard to put somebody's name on a power plant.
Right. Well, this is just off the top of my head. We had a study that you sponsored over the last 2 sessions about alternatives to capital financing. We talked about a general obligation bond instead of TRBs. We talked about expanding the HEAF program. We didn't really, in either of those 2 discussions, talk about this topic, so I don't know what the right answer would be, but I could certainly see if the state had a $1 billion sustainable energy program on the ballot, I think it would be very, very attractive, assuming that projects were going to be reviewed within certain parameters of cost return. It has an energy impact, it has an air quality impact, it has a cost efficiency impact, and it would have the benefit, obviously for us, of taking that out of competition with classroom and other student needs. So it would be sort of funded and reviewed on its own merits. Just a thought.
Well, I think we can look at where that idea might fit into those capital funding task force recommendations. And as a sidebar, those recommendations have also been passed on to the HCR 159 Commission that is concluding its report this month, and hopefully that will give some additional legs in life to those capital funding recommendations. Whether the funds will be there in the next session is an entirely different question. But are there any other questions for our UNT experts
I
here?
have one question. Excuse the voice. You all are so admirably aware of the Closing the Gaps goals and of your demographics and how those all work together. As you know, as you mentioned, we can't really close the gaps unless we recapture some people, students who have left the system either prior to graduating from high school. In this group of 18 to 24-year-olds that's so large in your region, well, I'm interested to know what you all are thinking about and how to attract people who have left high school without going on to higher ed.
No, that is a fascinating question, and I've never seen an analysis of what percentage of the Closing the Gaps goals in an ideal world would come from 18 to 24-year-olds. If we did everything we could possibly well, if we did everything we could possibly do to enhance their K through 12 preparation and college readiness, which you're working on, if we did everything to increase better vertical articulation with the community colleges so the pipeline wasn't leaking, that would maximize the 18 to 24 impact. But then, is that 100%, and is there a need for a return to school incentive program to go back after one's stop-outs, even the stop-outs who've stopped out for 20 years? I don't know what the experience has been in other states where that's been heavily marketed and tried.
Well, I think that the GED issue is one that we've talked about with the community colleges, and in the articulation study that CPUPSI did, we looked at that as well, because the articulation agreement is only as good as being sure that the students are eligible to start taking those community college courses. And so it is a pipeline issue, and dealing with the high schools, ensuring that students are taking the right courses there is important. That's why the early college high schools are so important, and we're participating in 2 of those as well from the Denton campus.
But if we've done
the
a study,
GO centers,
I haven't seen. If we've done a study, I haven't seen it, of how many people there are in the North Texas region with 10, 20, 30 credit hours who never completed a degree, who may have dropped out for childhood, military service, and I think your question really was, what methods do we have to reach out to bring some people back into higher education pipeline who are not in the 18 to 24? Was that?
Really, I'm interested in both things. I think it may be easier in some ways for us to recapture older people and get them back into the higher ed system, back into or into either one, and yet they're very hard to reach.
Well, one of the things we're doing with our new Center for Achievement and Lifelong Learning is ensuring that students, particularly older students, are aware that they can take up to 9 units without getting admitted to the university. So if they come and take some courses and they're successful, they can feel better about their chances of being admitted. So that's one thing we're doing. We're also working now with a for-profit organization through the center to offer certification courses and very broad online certification courses in a lot of areas that we think particularly out-of-work Texans will be interested in. And once they get engaged and the UNT label is on those courses, even though they're not for credit, it will sort of give them an opportunity to think about. It gives us some names of people to let them know, well, there's more that you can do. So those are a couple of the things we're doing to try to reach out to the adult learner.
Susan McGregor and I just met yesterday to talk about the students we've talked about frequently that have, the state's at least paid for 100 semester credit hours and we have no credit, a record that they've graduated, and we've matched from a recent group 8,000 of those with our financial aid database. And I was thinking, given that all you guys do in terms of online, that you could help those people complete those degrees, and we could certainly at the very least identify for you those who had attended UNT. And we have done that in other ways before. Sorry?
I'll call them tomorrow.
That would be great. I mean, we have
names and addresses,
Okay.
and we would like some help with that.
And previous
we would be thrilled. We would actually be thrilled to do that, David. I mean, I think that's so important. I mean, we do. I think have our BAS. I think is completely online right now, and for most students, that is the appropriate degree for them to get if they've got sort of a scattered number of courses.
It is. In fact, we might want to talk about whether you'd like to help us with those students wherever they are in the state.
Absolutely, we would love to help you with those students.
Great idea.
I've just committed,
Thanks for
how many
bringing that
faculty
up.
and staff to do this. But it's important.
We don't know what we've committed ourselves to, but it sounds good.
We can address the other students as well, those who haven't attended higher ed. We can help give some help with that.
I really appreciate the presentation. One of the things we don't get enough chance to do is to get out and visit all the campuses around the state. So it's really helpful and appreciated that you bring your campuses to us, so to speak, to see all the growth and all the great new programs that you have going on. So thank you for your time and for the information.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
There is one project on our agenda today under item 2E that requires committee action for recommendation to the board. The project is a request from Texas Women's University to construct an Institute of Health Sciences at Dallas Center. There's a supplementary materials packet at each of your places. The goldenrod color papers noted as agenda item 2E. And Dr. Ann Stewart and Harold Johnson with Texas Women's University are here to provide an overview of this project. Welcome, Dr. Stewart.
Welcome. I'm Ann Stewart, Chancellor and President of TWU, and Harold Johnson is with me, who is going to make this exciting project come into fruition. It's wonderful to be able to talk to you about new facilities. Some of you might know that this project that we're bringing forth is really a mirror image of what we did in Houston and completed and opened about 3 years ago. I was taken by the fact that we talked about the UNT system, and they are in various sites. One of the things I think that's interesting about Texas Women's University is that we are in 3 cities. We have 4 campuses, and yet we have a single administration. So it's a very different model. We're an independent university, one of the 4 out of the 35. And we run with a single administration and a single mission, very focused, because if there's one thing about UNT, we know who we are, what we do well, and we want to continue to do that the best that we can do it. So the Houston campus, which is an Institute of Health Sciences, OT, PT, nursing, healthcare administration, and nutrition, opened 2 years ago now, 3 years ago. That was all privately funded. It was gifted to the state. Well, we learned some wonderful lessons there. And one of the lessons that we learned is we went around and visited hospitals where we were supplying the nurses and OTs and PTs, is that they wanted a team-trained professional. They don't want silo educations in the new hospitals of today and tomorrow. So what we did in that institution was to break down all the barriers, and not only is the research area coordinated, but so is student space and education space and teaching space. We came up to Dallas after we had opened that building. We have 2 campuses in Dallas. Presbyterian is OT and PT. It sits across town 12 miles. We have nursing and our stroke center at Parkland, or in Southwestern's district. And everything that we had learned in Houston said that that's not the model to provide the best education. In addition to that, we needed new facilities. We had facilities that were opened in the 60s and in Parkland in the 80s at Presbyterian. And you can imagine in teaching healthcare where simulated models have to be there, and technology is all part of what happens if you go in to visit any relative, or if you've been in the hospital yourself, you know that your hospital room is a technology laboratory. So we're very excited about bringing all of that together into a single institution at the Parkland site. It is going to be state-of-the-art. We graduate more healthcare professionals than any institution in Texas. We're very proud of that, and we look forward to being able to grow our enrollment. We're about 900 students, give or take, at our Dallas campus now. We should be able to add about 25% as we look at growth. And so we're critical area, critical need. We do a wonderful job of it, and we provide facilities that are absolutely state-of-the-art and exciting. We also raise funds in order to help the state offset some of that and not come and ask for TRB monies or other sources of income. Although it would be remiss for us to say that we are so grateful to TRBs, because we're just breaking ground on a science building at the Denton campus that was TRB funded, and without the support of the state, we couldn't have done that. A lot of this conversation in the last hour has been about science and math teachers. We are, of course, if you look at our history, women's education of teachers would be in the classroom, superintendents, counselors would be part of that mission. And so science and math is very important to us, and we are very grateful for that funding. Mr. Johnson knows all the details about this project, but it's going to be exciting. We hope that you'll come to our dedication when you approve this, and we can get on with building it.
I'm Harold Johnson, Associate Vice President of Facilities Management and Construction, Texas Women's University. As Dr. Stewart said, we did a wonderful thing in Houston. Almost wore my knees out, but we did get it accomplished, have a wonderful structure there. What we plan to do here in Dallas is similar to Houston in a lot of respects, but different in so many as well. By the numbers, we will have approximately 50 nursing beds, probably a few more. We haven't nailed that down tight just yet, but 13 of those will be high-fidelity simulator beds. Another 21 will be birthing simulator and low-fidelity beds, and approximately 14 laboratories in the building, OT, PT, anatomy labs, you name it, musculoskeletal labs, a gait lab, and various types of facilities for occupational therapy, physical therapy, and nursing. Many of these labs will have state-of-the-art technology, about 100 cameras in nursing lab alone, to focus in on the simulation on the mannequins, where the teachers can monitor what students are doing during instruction periods. And these things are so focused and that they can focus in as you put sutures in a finger. And so it's going to be a very, very high state-of-the-art facility, as we have in Houston. Also, we'll have faculty offices as usual, and a state-of-the-art, world-class stroke center. which is unique to the Dallas campus. That's something we do not have in Houston. There'll be quite a few student spaces, student gathering spaces, for eating spaces, food services, multi-purpose rooms, breakout rooms, and things of this nature for the students to congregate. Many classrooms, from about 60-seat classrooms to an auditorium of 220-seat capacity in this building. A very large library, which we did not have to do in Houston, but we could take advantage of the Texas Medical Center library there, but we didn't have that luxury here, so we had to design that space in this building. Many research spaces, computer laboratories, very large laboratories for the students, and then some smaller computer laboratories as well.
I might say that on the Stroke Center, those of you who may or may not know it, we partner with Southwestern in the research part of that Stroke Center. What we are focused on is the pharmaceutical protocol to recover speech. Any of you who have had a loved one go through a stroke, you know that it is one of the most dramatic things that can happen to an individual. And not only the physical disability, but the inability then to communicate becomes so dramatic. And that is our area of research, and it is one of the areas where we do international research on that.
As UNT elaborated on, we're doing a lot of things that relate to green buildings. All of our buildings are very technological savvy buildings. We can operate the Houston facility from Mount Everest if we so choose. Every single aspect of that building can be operated over the internet. Dallas will be no different, including those nursing simulator labs I referenced a while ago. They'll be able to have students linked in Houston and Denton to observe what's going on in Dallas as well. Our buildings are, we met with our regents on August 22nd about LEEDs and green building. I did a presentation for the regents at that time. We design all of our buildings to LEED's silver certification. We're not necessarily seeking the certification every time. Now, how do we guarantee that? And people say you can't guarantee it if you don't have the piece of paper. We've gone a step farther. We have all of the LEED features in the buildings, which are the daylight views, the waste minimization factors, which requires for recycling materials in demolition projects, recycling construction waste, and sustainable construction materials, your carpets that have recycled products, and so on and so forth. Low viscosity paints, low E-glaze glass for higher energy performance, and all of those kinds of things. We also have a standard, a TW standard, that is a master integration package. We call it an enterprise package. That deals with all the mechanical, electrical systems within the building. That's where you get the major focus of your energy savings and your green points in buildings. So we focused on those, and what this master integration package does is pre-certifies the equipment. I mean, we're talking about every box, every control system, everything that goes in that building that relates to building controls and electric panels and so on and so forth. We pre-certify. Those things are bidded by our vendors and then installed in the process. This helps us on the front end with commissioning, which is done on the back end. And commissioning is a major step in the LEEDs certification project. We do commission all of our buildings, but this master integration concept really helps us strive toward that goal, since we are not seeking that certificate. Basically, this project will be constructed in 5 different phases. The first phase is the utility relocation. As you can see an imprint there. The second phase is a dormitory demolition, and you can see that imprint of the dormitory right there in yellow. And the third phase is the construction of the new Institute of Health Science facility. At that time, at the time of this construction, when it's completed, we will move everyone, relocate everyone from the Presbyterian campus and the Parkland Education Building, which is, you see the imprint of there. Next slide, please. Then we will demolish the education building. Next slide. At that time, we will build a surface parking lot where that facility was located. And the parking lot should be completed and in place. The building will be ready to move in August. Well, the project will be totally complete in August 2011. The building will be moved into at a different time. I thought I had a slide. Next slide, please. Okay, maybe it's not there. This is one of the concepts of the how the lobby will look in the building. And for any of you all that has been to the Houston facility, you know what a beautiful lobby scenario we have there. But it provides for beautiful gathering spaces for the students and to come in and mingle, and also a great reception place for the public that's coming to the building. That schedule is. We began in 2007 with our conceptual design. Question was asked, so I thought I would respond to that. Construction proposals, requests for proposals on the street as we speak. So we're definitely looking for approval of this project. Construction will begin in March, substantially complete in 2010. And then, as I said, we will do the setup, move-in, Parkland Presbyterian campus in December 2010 over the Christmas break. And hopefully they'll be up and running with classes in January of that year, and we will continue with the parking lots. We have purchased a couple of buses and made some arrangements with UT Southwestern for some out parking to transport our students during the period that we're constructing the parking lot. Next slide, please. What we plan to do is to add this jewel to the landscape of the Parkland Dallas Medical District.
Isn't that pretty? I just love buildings.
It's approximately 190,000 square feet, about $55 million.
All right, good presentation. Questions, discussion from the committee? I had, well, I guess two questions. Our briefing sheet says that the completion date was March 2011, but your presentation said August, so I assume August is the correct.
Right. We have to build the parking lot. The building will be complete, yes.
And one of the interesting things about this project is that because of the demolition and the taking of the Presbyterian building out of the inventory, you're actually having a slight decrease in overall space.
Absolutely.
My question was, is the Presbyterian building, is it being repurposed? Is it being...
No, that's on leased. That's a lease that we have with Presbyterian, and that will be canceled. Presbyterian will take the land back and also the building, and therefore will close that facility.
Do you know what the annual savings to the university will be in terms of rent?
Well, we don't rent the building.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said...
We lease the land. We built the building.
Okay.
And maintain it now. So there's a acceptance from Presbyterian to take the land back, and also to help us by the fact that they get 65 years back on their lease, and they also get it in building that they did not build.
And then there's an annual cost for the ground lease then to the university that will come to an end?
No, it's $1 a year. So.
Okay. They're getting a free building.
Well, not quite free, but yes.
All right. Any other questions regarding this project or discussion? If not, the chair, the staff recommends committee approve its recommendation to the board. This project will come to the board at the January meeting. If no further questions, then the chair will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Have a motion to approve from Elaine. Second from Lynn. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. All right.
And I will say that I have been to the Houston building, and it is gorgeous. And the simulation facilities are wonderful.
Thank you. We look forward to seeing you at the Dallas building.
You guys know how to close a presentation. That was a good shot with good comments.
Thank you very much.
One thing I did mean to call to the attention, and we'll talk about this in just a minute, is that you'll notice in your briefing books that we're now including, rather than what you were used to seeing in terms of statistics, the four-color so-called one-page report card, front and back. It follows the project briefings in your booklet, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Item
I'm going to
2.
have a tutorial on how to read it. I need a little help.
We can have a tutorial.
We will be glad to do that.
Thank you.
Item 2F was on the consent agenda, and so we'll move to item 2G. The agenda item discussion here is regarding possible changes to the utilization and cost of construction standards used in the project approval process. Staff was asked to bring together a group of institutional representatives to review the current guideline for classroom and class laboratory utilization, the standard for construction cost. Staff, specifically Gary Johnson, is bringing to this committee recommendations developed as a result of those discussions with institutional representatives. And I've asked them to present these to you today. They prepared a revised briefing sheet. I guess that's in our supplementary material somewhere.
It is the UNT. So it's a separate one?
I think it's a separate one.
It's labeled Agenda 2G, and it has some yellow highlights with draft across the front. That's the revised. We used TW's briefing sheet as an example to show you what changes would be made to the briefing sheet with these recommendations.
Everyone should actually have 3 different items marked 2G. And Gary, if you'll just walk us through the order you want to take these in.
Okay. You want to introduce?
Oh, yeah, I would like to introduce at this time Tom Keaton. He actually has just joined us, a month ago?
Yes, ma'am.
Beginning of November. He actually came the other direction. He came from Texas Tech to the coordinating board. Instead of sending people out to the institutions, we were able to get somebody back. So he's had a lot of experience in the facilities, and so he's been very helpful already.
Tom, welcome. We're glad to hear you. Well, I've heard your voice on a conference call, so it's good to meet you
Yes, sir.
face to face.
Thank you very much.
Tom was also worked as Texas Tech's representative on the utilization work group, so it was a good transition for him to come and continue working on this project. He also, last meeting, when you reviewed the audit protocol for the audit of facilities, a lot of that work that went into that was done by Tom when he was working at Texas Tech. So he worked on both the audit protocol work group and the utilization work group. So really glad to have him working with us on our side. So,
Well, it's my pleasure.
I wanted to go through start out with the utilization as we have on the screen. We have the. I think you need to go back one screen. Yeah. Okay. What I wanted to explain is that currently utilization is a guideline. It's an institutional guideline. It is not a project standard or an institutional standard. And so one of the things that we are attempting to do is to convert this utilization, our space performance, to a standard. The current guideline is that we measure classroom utilization of 38 hours a week and class laboratory of 25 hours a week. And what we're looking at proposing is a multiple measure score on space performance. And we're also recommending that this become a project standard, not an institutional standard, so that we can apply this to projects that have classroom or class laboratory space in the project. And so that's what we're going to show you here. Next slide. On the multiple measures, the work group focused on just kind of a wide open brainstorming activity of what measures might be considered as space performance and utilization of classroom and class laboratories. And I do want to thank them for their input and for their work. We had a short time frame to get this work done, and really got this accomplished in 3 meetings. James Massey from Texas A&M chaired the work group, and in the middle of that, he had to participate in moving Texas A&M Galveston up to College Station, so he was under a lot of stress during this time, and I appreciate his help in guiding this group. But after through the input, we narrowed down 3 measures that we wanted to include in the utilization of performance of utilization of space. Hours per week used is the current measure, and we are proposing to keep that measure as one of our measurements. Facility demand is the second measure that we are proposing. This would be a new measure. What we're trying to measure here is we're looking at all the instructional activity that is recorded or reported to the coordinating board by the institutions, so that we can look at all the utilization for instruction, not just what goes on in the classroom, because the classroom utilization, as we'll look at later, is a fairly small percent of the space on the campus, and it is not entirely, it's less than 50% of the instructional activity takes place in what we typically categorize as classrooms. So that's the second measure. The third measure is a measure of percent filled of the classrooms when they're used. If a classroom has 30 seats in it, we want to know how many students are in that classroom, and that's what this will measure. If they're putting 10 students in a classroom that holds 30 or 40, then they will get a low rating. If they're putting 25 students or more in that room, they're going to get a higher rating on this measure. So that's what we're trying to measure. The way and if you look in the white page on Agenda 2G, it shows you or shows you on the third page of that in order to receive the maximum points on classroom, the first measure, which is hours used, they will have to exceed 38 hours a week to get 4 points. And as I'll explain later, we're going to convert the points to a 100-point measure rather than using 1, 2, 3, and 4. But as you can see on the third page, they would receive more points for the number of hours above 38 that they receive. Same thing for class laboratory. They would need to have over 25 hours a week to get the maximum number of points. And rather than either an all or nothing, if they have 34 to 37.9, they would also receive more points than if they had lower utilization. Facility demand is also on that page, and it is also listed as an hours per week, but it would pick up utilization of non-classroom instructional activity. Then on the fourth page, you see a chart that shows to receive a maximum number of points, a classroom would have to have 65% filled, and a class laboratory would need to have 75% of the seats filled. And these would be, those 3 measures combined would be our performance goals for the institutions. what we have done is we have modified this, what's in your agenda, instead of going to a 20-point score, we're converting that to a 100-point scale, so that an institution would need to have earned 75 points for classrooms and 75 points for class laboratories to meet the proposed standard.
So that's these first two on this sheet,
Yes.
then 75 out of 100, 75 out of 100, and then 150 out of 200.
That's right.
You double the scale if it involves both types of space.
We have weighted these so that what's in your agenda, we've weighted those up so that we get to the 100-point scale. And the way it would look at on the briefing sheet, if you look at this item, is that if the project has only classrooms and no class laboratories, then we would expect a score of 75 or greater to meet the standard. If they have both classroom and class lab, as this project does, then we would be looking for an overall score of 150 or greater to meet the standard.
Gary, let me stop you for a second. In the white pages that came out originally with the book, when you were using the 4-point scale, it said the performance goal was a total score of 10 or above out of a possible 12. And then I think when we talked on the phone, I'm going from memory because I don't have my notes in front of me, we were talking about a 9 out of 12. But if the intent was that this standard be, that the standard be a score of 10 or better, and then we're converting to a 100-point scale, 10 of 12 is obviously a higher percentage than 75%. So I guess, am I missing something in the conversion to the 100-point scale?
We weighted, go ahead.
Yeah, utilization rates were weighted to a factor of 8, demand weighted to a factor of 9, and then percent fill was weighted to a factor of 8, and that had some shifting involved in that.
So so now, rather than each of them being exactly a third of the component, it's 8, 9, and 8?
Yes.
8, 9, 8, yes, sir.
Facility demand would be we have weighted facility demand as a higher weight in order to come to the 100-point scale.
Okay. So what you're recommending now is, as on the revised example TWU briefing sheet, 75 is the minimum standard out of a perfect score of 100.
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions about, did you have anything else on the classroom utilization presentation?
No.
Before we move on to the next one, I just wanted to go ahead and, are there any other questions regarding utilization and what's being recommended? Elaine, since you were part of the task force, did you have any other comments you wanted to make?
On facility demand, real quick, the facility demand, I thought we were also looking at how many, looking at not only what was being used, but then what was not being used because, or what they couldn't use because it was already being used. We talked about that?
Couldn't being
The demand was
We're looking at the instructional activity that is not, that the institution cannot put in a classroom because classrooms have a limited time
right.
of.
Right, and that is incorporated in the demand.
This.
Right.
Okay, I just
If their campus is typically open a certain number of hours a day, they may use all their classrooms, but they have what we're trying to pick up is the additional instructional activity that is going into seminar rooms or
in other areas,
other areas on campus which is in some cases a more appropriate room for that activity.
Right. Just wanted to point that out.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, so we don't call those kind of rooms classrooms?
Sometimes they're meeting rooms, sometimes they're seminars, they can be used multi-purpose.
Okay.
Unless they're used a minimum of 50% of the time as a classroom, they don't get reported to us as a classroom.
Okay.
So that gives the institutions some credit, if they have a graduate class and they hold the class in a meeting room because it's, a smaller class, this helps, take into those into account.
The major intent here is to go from having had a guideline to having a standard.
Yes.
So that everything we approve is based on standards and we don't have this double standard or this two-tier approach.
Squishy standard.
Yeah, squishy. That's a good word. Any other questions on the scoring, the weighting? What was the reason to modify the recommendation to go to 898 instead of a third, and a third?
When you look at 33 and 1/3, 33 and 1/3, 33 and 1/3, we just went 32, 34, and 32.
Okay.
Giving more weight to the demand.
So 32, 34, and 32. Okay, good. Thank you for
That's
converting
just-
that so I don't have to.
I think the work group would recommend that the facility demand figure, which is not being used now, is a good measure of the needs of the campus, because it picks up all of the instructional activity that's reported to the coordinating board.
So this, would we need to go back to the work group and get their feedback on it?
We have already sent this out to the work group. We're still getting feedback. We will be bringing rules to this committee at your March meeting. And those will be, comments will be
So we'll have their
incorporated.
feedback again on the different
Right.
weighting. Okay.
The timing is such that we couldn't recommend this to the board in time for the January meeting anyway, so we'll have plenty of time to cross the Ts and dot the Is. We'll see it as a recommended rule change, as Susan said, in March, and it'll be before the April board meeting. All right, well, let's if there's no further questions in that area, let's move on to the construction cost recommendations.
This is also in your, on page 5 of that same agenda item in your agendas. Next slide. The work group that I worked with on the construction cost was primarily the chief facility officers in trying to respect their time. Most of this was done by telephone. I did attend a meeting that group had in San Marcos, and most of the input that was used for this proposal came from that teleconference and that meeting that I had in San Marcos with them. This is already a standard. Construction cost is something that we've used in the past. What we have had in the past, though, is the standard has been the low figure and the high figure of the projects that you have approved over the last 5 years. So basically, the standard is if it fell within the range of previously approved projects, then it met the standard. What this proposal is recommending to do is to, I guess, narrow the approval range, but also try to include factors that drive construction costs. On one hand, we're proposing that the standard be the average plus or minus one standard deviation of the projects that have been approved. So that rather than doing the minimum and the maximum, we're going to focus on an average plus or minus a standard deviation. And as you see on the example, there is a handout that you have that has 2 projects on it. It's white color. The top project is Texas Women's University, and the bottom project is University of Texas at El Paso. So this handout shows you that the top box on each one of those is the 2007 standard for construction cost. It has this particular project is new construction medical health care, and if you go over to the second box, the low figure is $182, and the top figure was $289. And that's what the 2007 standard was based on. This particular project that was approved, recommended today, had a square footage cost of $209.41. Our updated fall 2008 construction cost, the maximum is $300. It has gone up from $289 to $300. So this project still falls well below that amount. What we're proposing is moving the standard to a pool of 7 years rather than 5 years, and then calculating an average plus one standard deviation above that average as the new standard. And as you can see, that would lower the standard based on 2008 projects to $276 a square foot, and this project still would fall within that amount. So that's basically, that's the, I guess, the recommendation. One of the things that we're also recommending is trying to increase the pool of projects, because some building types, we may not have one project out of every 5 years. And so in fact, when we did the 2008 construction costs, we lost some building types out of the pool because we haven't had one in it had been 6 years since we'd had one of those projects. Based on discussions with facility leaders in the state, a lot of them use a pool of 7 years for projects because it does take a while to get a project on board. So we're recommending to extend the pool to 7 years. Another recommendation we're making is to use actual cost once the project is completed. If you've approved a project and that once that building is completed, we would add the actual construction cost to that project into the pool. And it'll be interesting to see what the differences are between the approved construction cost and the actual construction cost after the project is completed.
Mm-hmm.
And
there were a couple of other parts of that recommendation to deepen the pool, and I want to take Brenda's question. Did you mention inclusion of non-higher ed buildings, other Texas municipal and institutional-like projects?
Right.
To not only deepen with years but broaden.
Right. We have a lot of classroom and classroom laboratory projects, but we don't always get a lot of performance hall projects built on campuses or other types of community use buildings. But they are often built by municipalities, by sometimes by school districts as a community project. That information about construction costs is available to the public since it's built with public funds. And so our proposal is where we need additional building projects added to the pool, that we go get that information and add it to our project.
And the other thing that, in the TWU as an example, but the other thing that you included in your recommendation was when we see these projects, pre-construction commitment, so to speak, you're calculating the net present value. You're taking inflation into account if there's not a guaranteed maximum cost on the project yet.
In the, as you say, we get a start date and an end date on now, and what we're proposing to do, if you look on the briefing sheet on the second page, is that we're proposing to ask the schools to give us more information about their timeline as to when they're going to start conceptual planning, design, selection of contractors, when they're going to start construction, when they anticipate substantial completion, and occupancy. And as you said, what we're proposing to do is to bring the midpoint of the construction schedule and calculated net present value to match that up against our current standard. Our current standard is based on prior projects that we've applied an inflation factor to, or construction inflation factor to bring it up to current. And what we want to do is take these projects as they come in and match the midpoint of construction costs back to the current date, using net present value.
Any questions about well, Brenda, you raised your hand.
Has been answered, thank you.
Okay. Just trying to anticipate. Elaine?
I think it's pretty self-explanatory.
Okay. If there's no further questions or discussion, we do have this revised standard briefing sheet that, as you've obviously already seen in yellow, even though I don't think the dates are accurate to the presentation we saw, you get the idea of what we're doing to further modify and add information and standards to the briefing sheets. And hopefully this will give us better standards, more accurate standards, and then allow us to be more, demanding or increase our expectations about whether projects do or don't meet those standards. The last part of the presentation,
I did have a slide on the
pie charts.
On the pie charts, if you want.
This is pretty interesting stuff.
Want to look at that.
Before we leave the topic on the standards, I think it's just important to note and to emphasize that the work groups have been, this has not been done in a vacuum from our staff. This has been directly involved with the folks in the ground that
I certainly appreciate the input from all the institutions, and want to let them know that we'll be going back to them as we prepare rules. We'll be going back to them for input, additional input.
Mr. I had one question. I hope this wasn't covered while I was briefly out of the room. Remember when we had the problem with the cost of copper going up so much? Mm-hmm. Will we be able to put things like that in, or we just deal with that when we have to?
That would be on a project-by-project basis. We will ask the institutions for explanations if it appears that their project and is not within our guideline, our standard.
So sort of like the way we calculate regional differences, we'll just deal with that.
And that's one of the other things I didn't mention. We are going to incorporate regional differences that we already use into the analysis of the projects.
I think that's great. Looks like a big improvement.
Conversely, when those commodity costs fall, we need to be aware of and ask those questions as well. I know my customers are asking me. Aren't those prices coming down? You want to go on to the net assignable space?
Yeah. You want to go ahead to the next? Okay. A question came up about teaching space and about teaching classrooms and what do we consider as teaching space and what do we consider as classrooms. And so we've prepared a couple of pie charts to show this is not campus gross square feet. This is net assignable square feet. So it doesn't include some of the space that isn't assignable. But as this pie chart shows, teaching space in the inventories is 22% of the net assignable space. 45%, the largest amount there, is non-education and general space, which would be dormitories, other auxiliary space, student unions, anything that is not considered education in general. Out of the teaching space, though, what I wanted to emphasize is that 13% of the majority of the teaching space is other teaching space, not classroom and class laboratories. So when the current guideline of looking at only classroom 38 hours a week and 25 hours a week in class laboratories, we were only looking at a very small 9% of the net assignable square feet on the campus. So we're hoping that this modified performance is looking at more of the space of the institution. The next slide shows the.
Here, before we move to the next slide, this is these are the percentages for statewide, all space statewide. Is that correct?
All university space statewide.
The 35 general academics pooled together?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
This is interesting because if you think back over what you've approved over time, you've approved very few classrooms, and so this really reflects. And Susan and I have talked about this before, and this is reflective of what's the case nationally. I mean, this isn't unique to Texas.
No.
But I think this makes it very clear.
Yeah, it was a surprise, I think, to both Elaine and myself on a conference call the other day to learn that what we think of as traditional classrooms. At that time, you were saying 3%. I see it's at least a little bit higher. But
Yeah, well, I was thinking
5% of all space.
gross square feet, which it includes not a space that's not assignable,
Right.
lobby space and things like that. But if we remove the non-E and G space, this next slide shows the E and G assignable space, and that increases teaching space to 39%. And so classrooms, what is classified as a classroom is 10% of the E and G assignable space.
Does that blow your mind?
And 23% is teaching space that we do not consider as classroom or class laboratories.
Can you give some examples of teaching space other?
A meeting room, which is a room type 6A, there are literally there's about 90 plus different room types that are currently in the inventories. Many people would walk into one and look and say that's a classroom, but in actuality, based, as Susan was saying earlier, based on the preponderance of use of that room, it might be classified as a meeting room. It looks like a classroom, it walks like a classroom, however, the inventories are prepared based on the predominance of use, not the structural characteristics of the room. Other teaching, so those 6As, demonstration area, exhibition areas on a campus. As far as in the laboratory arena, you've got one room type, which is room type 210, which is a class laboratory. However, you have 220s, which are special class laboratories, 230s, which are individual study laboratories, 250s that are research laboratories. When you put those all together in the aggregated space, then you bring into play research space and the academic, and that grows based on the perspective as that goes forward. So those are some examples, sir.
Might we have overcomplicated room categorization?
Probably.
Our current classification scheme is based on the National Center for Educational Statistics model.
That's a good one.
It is complicated.
It's used so that
Answer the question.
it is more. It's been done nationally. If it's not just in Texas,
You're blaming it on the feds, basically. Bottom line.
Absolutely, sir.
The question is whether you want to be able to compare practice in Texas with what is happening elsewhere. And if you don't, you could make it.
if you don't follow the
That's
national
complex.
standards, you lose your comparisons.
I think we need a classroom standard bailout.
I agree.
No, that's a good idea. Our classrooms are.
Yeah.
Well, and I had a professor that liked to used to take the class outside and sit in the grass on a sunny day. So where does that get measured?
Well, fortunately, with the demand measure, that would be counted in the
Yeah.
demand measure.
If you're assigned to that classroom, whether you meet there or not, you're
Still counted in
You're
the
still
you're still counted as using that space.
Well, and that's really why I like the third metric. To me, it's akin to the way the lodging industry tracks room nights, and we're tracking, filled seats. I started to use another term, but wouldn't have been appropriate. Any other questions?
Don't want to know.
I think this reflects a lot of good work, a lot of good information. I mean, these charts are pretty eye-opening, I think, too.
Just to overall, the work groups, are they encouraged by the direction we're going? Or
I think so. It's been something that we have started at different times. We've started working on this, and I think they will be appreciative once it gets into rules and they know
exactly
what they're actually going to be measured against.
And having been on both sides of the fence, both at the university and this very committee, or not committee, but work committee, it is important to have a voice in that, to get that actual, what are the issues that are on the ground today view, and it really was eye-opening to a lot of institutions, just the knowledge sharing that went on in there, and that will continue to go on and has gone on. So it's a very beneficial process.
Well, we need to be fair and objective. We need to be neither overly restrictive or overly loose. So I hope that will manifest itself in the rules. And I do want to take into account that we do see projects from time to time that for which the costs have been bid. And so at that point, I think we need to cut off the inflation adjustments once they've got a guarantee max.
Right.
Any other questions?
I have a question about how, is there some sort of platonic ideal for the utilization of space? I mean,
You're asking about Plato's ideas specifically?
no, not Plato. He didn't have very good space. But
I
is there,
refer to caves.
do we have in mind some university that would utilize space really well that we're trying to match our universities to? I sort of don't get what the standard is, what the source of the standard is.
In other words, what should the pie look like?
Yeah, yes.
As far as the distribution of space, there are several studies. Some were done out of APPA, the American Physical Plant Association, which has a lot of views of higher education. Is there a one-size-fits-all? I don't think there is. I mean, certainly we could look at the numbers. In terms of utilization...
I know one size doesn't fit all, but I guess what I want to know is this meaningful, what we're doing? Is this standard meaningful?
In terms of the space distribution on the pie charts? The Texas, Ira Fink and Associates, which is a consultant out of Berkeley, did a study some years ago and looked at 39 universities nationwide. Found Texas was right in the mean in the distribution of teaching space, or teaching space, lab space, et cetera.
Okay.
And we were right along in the aggregate for the state. And those numbers haven't shifted substantially since
So
then.
there's something that guides, I guess the common sense idea is we don't want a bunch of empty classrooms, we don't want to be heating up a bunch of empty space. There's something
That is
from
the
which
draw.
all this is emanating. Okay.
Right.
I guess the easiest thing to do, Lynn, might be to compare our net assignable space and our E&G assignable space to national averages. If I understood
There is some
correctly,
studies.
those are existing.
That was the Ira Fink
You
study.
don't have to do extra work to do that.
No, we can
comparison.
just supply those studies to you. That'd be fine. We
But
could
boy,
easily-
that's tough because you don't.
And it varies
don't know
by
how to interpret
institution.
that, do you? I mean,
Well, it's the whole, I assume it's the whole pool or sampling of the whole pool so that you would have a mix of flagship and comprehensive and
And it
teaching
does vary by
universities.
space. Obviously,
But I'm just
UT
wondering if
Austin
that
is going to
tells
have a
you-
lot more research space than, Sul Ross. You're going to have differences among types of institutions, and that's just because of
Well, and
the
that-
nature of what they're doing.
If the sampling of the nationwide studies, it takes that into account, of course, I mean, the question is, does the national sample reflect the mix we have here in Texas? I don't know. That's right. I guess we could.
The study, as I recall, it wasn't a randomized sample. It was, and there was different size institutions. So you could get some inferences. I wouldn't say it's I wouldn't statistically say I could, assign a definite effect, but we were in that range. There was nothing out of order. But certainly we can do some data and find that. I mean, there are a lot of associations from NACUBO to
I don't
APPA.
want you, I'm not requesting that. I don't feel like I'm not able to say what if on this committee we want to say, we want the state's universities to build buildings that are efficient and well-run and, aren't too big and aren't too hot and aren't too cold. I mean, is there anything like that that's guiding all this? I don't understand the standards, is what I'm trying to say.
There is statute that tells us that we need to look at cost
Okay.
and utilization and that sort of thing.
And-
In statute, that gives us tells us where we really need to focus our attention as far as looking at the buildings that come to us for approval.
well, but also it's institution by institution.
It is
It's based on the
institution.
demand of that particular
Right.
institution, and then so we look at the
And it's the-
efficiency per project, and this is more or less a roll-up, right?
Right.
Of the
Right.
results. So
It's a roll-up.
Sort of measure.
This is
that's what I'm
just-
saying. The result. It's hard to. I don't know what the results are telling me, other than these are the components of, the individual projects. But if we're doing our job, at that particular level, I think that's
And this is- yeah,
how we
and this
know
is
whether
just
we're
the-
getting the best result or not.
I get it now, thank you.
I think there's still the questions related to what you're saying that I raised earlier with UNT is that as some campuses, a few campuses moved to having several thousand students only take instruction online, what does that mean to this measure? And you need to look at facility needs differently. And some of the calls end up in terms of large office spaces for people who interact with the students versus needing classrooms at the same level. So at one time, I think UNT had something like 2,000 students who were not on campus at all at the time they were taking it. So how does that have an impact on that? And I'm not sure that the national studies have yet taken that into account.
Probably not yet.
So if we do it at some point, we may be the first state to actually do it.
And one of the things, I've heard differing opinions from the institutions on how many of their students are 100% online, and there's some fluctuation. Apparently it went way up, and now it's kind of, from what I understand, coming back down, and part of that is the student engagement part of it, trying to get...
And even the question is, if the student's taking 4 courses and one's offline, do they place the same demand as the student who takes 4 on? And so, there's subtleties, and I don't know how important it is, but I think that we really need to think that through. And there may be some other areas, but I think that is related to your question and reflects differences in campuses. And I doubt that UT Austin, for example, would ever be in the mode, or A&M, that they would be offering that many courses online.
Not as a percentage.
As a percent of what they're doing. So we may at some point have some campuses who are doing a significant amount.
So you're saying that the classroom usage might just be a subset of the whole delivery system?
Yeah, there may be, if at some point institutions do a much larger part of their instruction online and they don't step on campus, it doesn't mean they don't need facilities, but they may need a different type. It may be that there may be less. Right now, they're all counted the same way, and it drives the model in terms of how much space they need.
That's really interesting to get out ahead of that and think about that.
I would encourage the committee members, if you do think of other questions or additional data you'd like to see, just shoot an email to Susan or Gary, in the next couple of weeks in anticipation of the March meeting, and we can get that pulled together. Item 2H, this agenda item is consideration of recommendation to the board to adopt the Commissioner's recommendation relating to amendments to Chapter 17, Section 17.80 and Section 17.82B and C concerning rules applying to energy savings performance contract projects. And we've lost our Commissioner. Is there any comments you want to make about this item?
I don't think so. There was an audit finding. They did an audit of not just us, but also of the State Energy Conservation Office, and wanted some more oversight of those contracts. And so we've included that into our rules, and that's what this is in regards to.
Did we have any comments received?
No, we did not receive any comments on this at all.
I move we adopt the amendments.
Second.
A motion and a second from Lynn and Brenda. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Agenda item 2I. This agenda item is consideration of recommendations to the board. Final adoption of new sections 22.196 through 22.202 of board rules concerning provisions. Well, that speeds it up. Concerning provisions for scholarships for students graduating in the top 10% of their high school class that were adopted on an emergency basis on October 23rd, 2008. And Lois Hollis, Senior Assistant to Deputy Commissioner for Business and Finance, is available for questions. So do we have any questions? She's theoretically available, but do we have any questions in the first place?
These are exactly the same rules that y'all adopted on the emergency basis. There have been no changes to the rules.
Move to approve.
We have a motion to approve from Elaine. Second from Lynn. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Agenda item 2J. This agenda item is consideration of the... I'm going in a row. I got to think of the alphabet here, of the recommendations for the annual allocation of the HEAF, the Higher Ed Assistance Fund. It's important to understand that the HEAF committee recommendation includes using the fall 2008 space model information. At this point, we don't have all the data necessary to run this model, but we will have it for the board meeting.
Right.
Okay. Given that, the motion needs to be changed to a move for adoption of the HEAF committee recommendations regarding the methodology for calculating the HEAF formula allocation. Any questions or comments on that?
I so move.
Have a motion for Lynn.
Second.
Second, and the motion and the second, I assume, are based on the modified.
Yes,
Modified.
I so modified move.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Okay. Motion carries. Agenda item 2K, there is a handout for this, is consideration of recommendation to the board of the 2009 participation forecast, and Janet Binky is available for questions. Janet?
It's a quick presentation.
Yeah, very,
But we will make it fast.
yeah, very quick presentation. Just leave it like it is. So all of you have seen the handout, and this is what we're going to be talking about right now. Every 2 years, the coordinating board prepares a participation forecast for universities, community colleges, and independent institutions. The health-related institutions are not included in the forecast because their enrollment's not primarily based on student demand. The forecast uses Texas residents, and it's calculated by applying 5 years of enrollment data by age, ethnicity, and county to the Texas State Data Center's population forecast for Texas counties. This means that the forecast reflects current enrollment patterns. Non-resident enrollments for 5 years are also analyzed, and the recent rates are used to estimate the future enrollment of non-Texas students. Institutions are contacted for their input on local conditions that might not be reflected in the current enrollment patterns, and because the projections are based on these current patterns for future populations, the results are viewed as being very conservative. The 2015 population projection is 3.5% higher than that was projected in 2006. This is largely because we're using a different population forecast from the Texas State Data Center. We are using the one that they are suggesting right now, and that's caused a lot of the increase. Another small part of the increase is that we've had an upturn in enrollments in 2008, and these have also contributed. But the moderate rate of growth that we had for the 3 prior years is what's keeping that enrollment fairly flat. And at the moment, these projections forecasts are still in a state of flux because the institutions are still providing us some input on them. The major reason for preparing the forecast is to inform institutions what their enrollments are projected to be if they do not change the ethnicity, age, and geographic origin of their student bodies. Particularly in the past, institutions were sometimes unaware of major demographic changes occurring in their regions from which they draw students. Now, institutions are well aware that the Texas population is becoming more diverse, but some of them still don't have the resources or the capacity to determine how those changes will affect their student populations. Now, the projections are also used by the coordinating board as a baseline for what we anticipate would happen if there is no change in the current trends. This slide shows what the trend line would be for the forecast for public universities and two-year institutions. It's relatively flat, and that reflects the 5 prior years prior to this current fall that were used as the basis for the projections. So you can see that we have a small upturn in 08, but the 5 prior years were pretty much flat, and that's what is the driving factor in these projections. The white line that you'll see up there is the closing the gaps goal, and so you can see that it's escalating very rapidly while the participation forecast trend line is relatively flat.
And you may also notice that the forecasted line goes out to 2020, so we're actually looking past where the Closing the Gaps targets start, and that's something we will be talking about.
The gap, essentially what this shows is that, based on trend analysis, we're going to be 92,000 short in 2010 and 171,000 short of our 2015 goal.
Yes.
Now, hopefully with the 2008 upturn, that's going to show that there are some programs that are kicking in now, and but it's the 5-year prior that is driving this flattening.
Right. So, I mean, it would take another 2 years of similar growth before
Right.
that tip the balance of the projections.
That's the hope.
That's the hope. That's what we're...
That's the intention. And this slide shows the accuracy of the prior forecast for 2006 and looks at what the actual is for 2008 from 2006. And you can see it's pretty accurate, and that's not necessarily a good thing in this case. Do you have any questions about the forecast?
I have one. I noticed where in your detail that you have about 5 or 6 institutions that had actually had increases in enrollment, but you showed them dropping for 2009. And I was just curious because the trend, I'm assuming that's coming out of the demographics for their draw.
Some of them are demographics. Some of the institutions tend to do a up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down sort of thing.
The projections for the state are much more accurate than the ones for the individual institutions, but it's amazing if you look at individual institutions, they do have a lot of fluctuation.
Actually, I don't want you to let that go by. Actually, you've been very accurate for a large number of institutions, but you've had a handful in which you've had some problems. I just want to...
And that's one of the things that we have, why we go out and let the institutions comment, because some of them we are on the by institution level. One of the comments that we received this time was from in the El Paso area, apparently in the military, reduction of bases. They're moving about 5,000, or they're moving a lot of soldiers to Fort Bliss. So that is something that our historical trend won't pick up, but we try to take that into account in this.
Neither will it pick up the impact of Hurricane Ike.
That's right. There's certain things that we know are happening that we try to take those into account as much as we can.
Their admissions requirements and any number of things.
But it does drive home why we need an action plan in our regional plan to address those participation and success goals that are slipping behind.
Because they're not just generic anymore. I mean, we're down to the last 5 years where you're going to have to look and ask the universities to do specific things in their specific, based on their specific.
Shift into high gear.
Yeah.
Related to that, both Raymond and I, at separate points in our Regents and Trustees meeting, mentioned that institutional targets fall far short of meeting the state needs in terms of Hispanics. And the reality is, if some institutions don't understand that, they could actually be in jeopardy of not having sufficient enrollments to support themselves over a certain number of years. So we have to emphasize that a great deal more in the regional plan.
I think Janet's next presentation may address some of these things.
Yeah.
So
We'll continue to talk
the chair would
about this.
entertain a motion to recommend the forecast for 2009 to the board. Have a motion from Lynn, second from Elaine. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign.
Mr. Chairman, maybe we ought to have, before a board meeting sometime, how we highlight best practices, maybe we should have an institution that's meeting its targets. I think it'd be a fairly short presentation, but we probably ought to start highlighting that as much as we can.
And one of the things that Janet and her group did this time is we took the population, the forecast, or not the forecast, but the Closing the Gaps goals, and we, using current, population or the population projections and current draw patterns, allocated out the goals, not their targets, but what the goals would be for each of the institutions, and sent that out to the institutions so that they could look at how, based on the population, how that would affect their area and them in their drawing patterns. And there are actually, we have gotten some of those back, or most, probably the majority of and they have their targets, and Janet will talk about that as part of their
Staff will be working more with it in the uniform recruitment and retention
Right.
plans as well. That was an integral part of that.
Well, item 2L is a report on participation and success progress. So, Janet?
Just this slide is just a reminder of what our goals are for the state. We want to increase the number of enrollments by 630,000 more students, and we want to award 210,000 undergraduate degrees, certificates, and awards. Okay, and the areas that the board has chosen to focus on because of issues of not achieving the targets are to increase the Hispanic population, the additional need for technology degrees, and for certified teachers. Since we've just talked about the participation forecast, I wanted to emphasize what the differences are between the forecast and closing the gap. So we mentioned that the forecast is based on historical trends. It'll be what happens if the institutions don't change their current patterns of attracting students. Closing the gaps is where the state wants to be, and we expect the institutions to make changes to reach those goals, and we as an agency also are undertaking a number of initiatives to help with that as well. Next slide. In the July 2008 progress report, we had this slide that shows you where we are on the various targets that are part of the participation goal. So you can see that for Hispanic participation, we're well below the targeted level. Okay, so here's a slide with a little bit of good news, that for our 2008 enrollment represents the largest increase in enrollment since 2002. So that's really actually a big deal, because we've had so many years in which we've had very, very modest enrollment increases. You can see the slope of the line there has started to change. We have 43,000 more students this year than we did last year, and if we continue on that trend, we'll just barely skirt below what the statewide target is. We need about 44,000 each year to enroll, more students to enroll, if we want to keep up with where the Closing the Gaps target is.
44,000
Is what we need.
per year? Okay, when I ran those.
44.
I thought it was 49,000, but maybe I.
Well, this slide is probably just this. Well, anyway, I got 44 when I was looking at it, but we'll double check. We are a little bit below where we should be, and I didn't account for that in that number. Wanted to let you know what the sources are for the increase, and also to remind you that we'd actually projected that we'd have about over 50,000 more students when we use the preliminary numbers, but now that we've got most of the institutions certified, most but not all, so these are still preliminary, we have come down considerably, and the increase is down to the 43,000 rather than about 53.
That's a huge drop. The first number was 53,000.
Usually we estimate about 5% drop, but this time it was a lot larger. And some of that could be caused by Ike, because that was occurring just about the time the institutions were enrolling students.
Never had a change from the preliminary that large before.
I know. And I had actually Tarrant County, and I don't know whether it was a reporting error in the preliminary stuff, but Tarrant County Northeast actually dropped almost 1,400 from that one institution. And then Concordia University dropped 1,000 from their preliminary. Texarkana College dropped 600. A couple of the other Northwest Tarrant County campuses dropped 500 each from their preliminary. So there were some big drops, and I don't know whether they just took a guess when they sent us their preliminary numbers or what. I mean, we had called all of them to verify them and that sort of thing, but
we need to follow up and make sure they're taking it seriously enough, because those are areas where I can't think of any.
No. What we haven't seen are big drops from Ike. I mean, there were 200 and 300 drops in some of those areas, which we kind of expected.
Quick math.
Tarrant County.
Yeah, Tarrant County, I did not expect at all.
Given this drop, is this drop reflected in the 279,086?
Yes.
Okay. Given that, and just some quick math, over the next 7 years enrollment, we need 50,000 and change per year, not 44,000. additional student enrollment.
Okay, looking at where the increase did come from, about half of it came from Hispanic students, and the African American enrollment was up 7,000. Dual credit is a big deal these days. It's had a dramatic rise in the last 8 years, and it grew from 07 to 08 by 14,000. And two-year institutions were responsible for 30,000 of the increase.
Yeah, I think we're probably going to have to talk about how we address dual credit when we're looking at these numbers, because the number has gotten quite high now, and those numbers will likely increase.
Yes.
And so while they are getting college credit, it may be making us feel a little bit better about our increases than we should.
Than we should be. It's 75,000 students are enrolled in dual credit.
Oh.
That's huge.
Darn.
Yeah.
I think 2 years ago, the community colleges actually would have had an enrollment decrease if not for dual enrollments. Within the last 2 or 3 years, I don't recall which year.
About 3 years ago.
Well, we just need to get that on the table, recognize it, and talk about.
It's important enrollments. I'm not
They are
trying
very
to.
important, and those students are much more likely to continue into higher ed
I don't think
after
that's
they
a bad
graduate.
thing. The question is we need to understand what it really says about our.
And we've had, I don't think you have it in here, but there was one chart we started using lately where with the increases, we actually show part of the bar as dual and credit, so you at least get a good feel for how much of that's dual credit versus the really on-campus student that we're typically thinking of. Sorry, Janet.
That's quite all right. Higher education's becoming more diverse. You saw that the real increases came from African American, Hispanic students. So you can see from this slide that the decline from 2000 to 08 for white students was about 8%, and Hispanics were up about 5%. So they're accounting for a larger percentage of the student population. Now this slide puts all three things together: the institutional targets, the participation forecast that we talked about, and the closing the gaps trend line. We have just asked the institutions to update their targets. They're still in the process of providing us some more information on those. But for the numbers we currently have, they've actually increased their targets quite a little bit. And where the white line, which is the targets from the institutions, it's much closer to the closing the gaps goal line than it was in the past. But you can see that if we actually are closer to the actual or the participation forecast, we're going to be significantly below where we need to be to close the gaps.
So we need to close the targets before we close the gaps.
Yeah.
Good, great progress. But
It is.
There's no reason that white line shouldn't be exactly on top of the red line.
Yeah, that's what we would hope. Now, these next two slides are to show you some of the things that were referred to when UNT's group was talking. This slide shows the 2015 Closing the Gaps goal, and then where we are, our progress to date in the red lines. So, for instance, you can see that the largest enrollment increases in the future still needed in the Metroplex, in the Gulf Coast, and in Central Texas. But if you look at South Texas, it looks like they're nearly halfway to meeting their goal of total enrollment. But on the next slide, you'll see that if you look at the enrollment broken out by ethnicity, particularly for South Texas, you see something dramatically different. And that's because the white and African American populations are attending at higher rates than the Hispanics in those areas. Those populations are anticipated to actually drop, and so there'll be a lower number of students. But when we look at it by individual ethnicity of the students who are going to attend or who we want to attend, we're much further behind for the Hispanics than we are for the overall number. This slide is similar to the last one, but it uses 2010 as the comparison. The light blue is the progress that's been made so far. You can see that for African Americans, we're actually doing quite well, and for white students, we're lagging behind a little bit, but the yellow line, the targets that the institution set for 2010, looks like for both of those groups, if they meet their targets, will be on track to close the gaps in those areas. Unlike those, you can see with Hispanics that the red bar there shows that we're actually well below where we need to be to close the gaps.
Yeah, we may be suffering from Steve Murdoch not being in Texas, because I noticed at our Regents meeting that a number of newer regents said that, noted that the population is changing. They were noting that they were going to have a large number of Hispanics in the future. Didn't seem to recognize that change has really occurred already. And I think we're probably going to have to pick up that mantle a bit from Steve, because he did such a good job of going around and giving that message, and we may have to do even more than we are to get that message out.
Yeah, well, I think what you were saying earlier about the bottom line and get the message out real fast.
Yeah.
Well, as Susan mentioned, we did send out to the individual institutions what we think they're closing their enrollments should be by ethnicity if they're going to close the gaps. So that's what they use then to inform their discussion about their institutional targets this time. So this is just a wrap-up that we've had considerable growth, and Hispanic growth continues, and the percentage of students coming directly from high schools is increasing slightly. Here are the success targets from the July 2008 progress report, and aside from two of those, we're pretty far behind. Next slide. This shows the progress for FY 2008 regarding bachelor's, associates, and certificates. We're pretty much right on target, but you can see that trend line is, the slope of that line is getting flatter and flatter all the time. We need to reverse that if we're going to actually achieve the goals. And this is similar information for the bachelor's and associates. We're doing pretty well in both of those areas. The institutions think that they're going to award a lot more degrees in the next 2 years, but we'll see what happens there. And here's the one where there's a really big jump that's projected by the institutions. We're going to go back and check with them and make sure that they intended to report what they did for doctoral degrees. We're already well beyond the 2010 target that we had, but you can see that in the next 2 years they think they're going to double the number of doctoral degrees that are awarded. So,
well, this is in some ways a good heuristic for where the institutions are focusing.
Yes.
And not realizing how many of their students are undergraduates.
Yeah.
I think this is where we can and should play a role in refocusing them with a quid pro quo on performance and bachelor's.
And I think the board's recommendations and the incentive funding as well with the awards for graduates should help if institutions are attending to that, because the largest potential number for graduates is obviously at the undergraduate level. We're going to have to help make sure they're understanding
Refocus them.
I think, David, your comment about the regents not knowing that the change has occurred, if the institutions were more focused on their incoming pipeline, K through 12, pre-K through 12, they would know what the face of their recruits look like.
I think that's right.
And it just, it's astonishing. You got to get down there.
Mm-hmm. You're right.
Well, I'm not so sure that we should be considering new doctoral programs until we see the other numbers align.
You mean see where they are with their targets.
Right.
Yeah, I think
We will provide all that information when we get them all in to everybody. And this may be, I will digress, I think. This may be where, if you go back and you look at that one page, report card.
Right.
That is going to be the same type of report card that will come to your committee.
Right.
When you look at new programs, it will show how they are doing in some of these areas.
Right. And,
So,
you know, we don't have to have a lot of blood, sweat, and tears about it for programs and for buildings if they aren't at their targets. They could just maybe not make it out of the committee. I mean, you know.
Yeah, I agree.
We need to refocus on where the real growth need is.
There's only one way to focus, I think. I mean, for most institutions, it's just
Stick.
the dollar sign.
All right, Janet, continue, please.
Okay. This slide breaks out the numbers for the bachelor's, associates, and certificates by ethnic groups, and you can see once again we're below on Hispanics. We don't have a institutional targets for whites, and we're also below on African Americans. This is by far the worst of the slides. Shows that we've made absolutely no progress on the STEM fields or the technology fields. We only award 898 more degrees than we did in 2000. And we're way, way, way below the target. The situation for nursing and allied health is much better, and we're about on pace to meet that goal. And
Excuse me, Janet.
yes.
You know, it's just so frustrating that it's all connected together. Got all these people who don't pass algebra, and the end result is that slide. So,
Absolutely.
why don't, I mean, algebra, we've got to do something about it. Or somebody does. Sorry. Excuse me.
Next slide kind of shows how those STEM degrees break out, too.
Yeah, you can see that engineering, we're actually making some improvements, but computer science, we're getting worse, and we didn't put the goal lines on there because we didn't set the goals by the individual type of STEM field. But if we had the goal line on there, it would be considerably above any of those.
And that's what's important to point out. We're still way below, we're making progress.
Yeah.
We're way below.
Way
what we
below.
need.
way below.
Way below. Okay, so what are we trying to do? We're revising some of the strategies that are in the Closing the Gaps document. We're concentrating on Hispanic participation and success with your help, and we're working with the High-Tech Consortium to facilitate discussions for the best way to meet the technical workforce needs of the state.
What do you mean by revised strategies?
We're looking at the strategies. We have the Uniform Recruitment and Retention Strategy, which is in there. It's a document that Judy Barreto's group has been focusing a lot more attention on. We're starting to get them. We're going to be having discussions. You know, they're now going to be reviewed. Each one of them is being reviewed, and I think there's going to be she's pulling together some peer institutions to review those strategies to see what they're doing to offer help to the other institutions. There's some that are tied to those strategies that we're going in and we're actually doing more work, and we will be using the work that Janet's group is doing where we send out what the targets should be, you know, allocating those targets along with the Judy's group and looking at what they're sending in for their recruitment and retention programs.
When you say
that sort of
strategies,
thing.
are you only referring to URRS?
No, there's other strategies that we
You
have.
need to explain what strategies are in the context of closing the gaps.
Okay, in closing the gaps, there are strategies within each of the groups. For participation, one of our strategies was to have the recommended high school program be the default and to use it. That strategy actually also includes using that for admissions, minimum admissions to universities. Those two have now been adopted by the legislature, and so that strategy is complete. Doesn't mean we've seen the results of it yet. So there's things like that. You know, the 4x4 as the recommended high school program is going into effect for those graduates in 2011.
Okay, one other, for people who weren't around when the Closing the Gaps was developed, it's important to know that the board chose at the time to have just a few select strategies that they thought would make the difference. They didn't try to make a comprehensive list. So some of them have been done, but if there are any new strategies added, that would need to come through the board as a formal part of Closing
When
the
you say
Gaps.
revise, does that mean you're changing or?
We're looking at those and working
that
now
would
with
come-
you. Yes, that would all come to the
Detail,
board.
okay.
That would all come
That
to
was
the
my
board.
question.
Yes, no, that would all come to the board before anything happened on this.
Could I think one thing this committee might like to see is the agency action plan that we've talked about before, maybe at our March meeting.
Okay.
I know we identified the three, of the 18 goals, the three that were lagging the most in the executive summary of the regional plan, talked about what that gap was, like STEM degrees have to double from 12,000 to 24,000. And we talked in general about how we were going to attack that, but now the important follow-through is to turn that into an action plan for the agency and with detailed responsibilities and target deadlines. And whether you use the format I sent you or another format, I think it would be good to have an overview of that at our March meeting if we could.
Can we have any impact in terms of suggesting a strategy that we don't have the power to implement, like, the Japanese method for teaching math? How long do we go? Is the state going to go where something doesn't work before they do something about it? I'm frustrated because our charts up here are related to things that we can't control, or we haven't. I mean, can we be more effective in putting forth things we know will make a difference?
I think the importance of the board making the decision to have a few select strategies is reflected in that. So one thing that the board did not have direct control of was that the recommended high school program would be the default curriculum, but in working with TEA and working with the legislature, and so it was very judicious in saying how many things can we have like that.
Right.
So it picked that as one that it could really focus on, and so that's been done. The board's done some other things outside the plan that are reflected, but I think it's a matter of the board selecting something and again judiciously, because where will it make the most difference, and then work closely with whoever the other bodies are. But you have to be selective, I think, in doing that.
Well, I think integrating the college readiness standards in the curriculum and assessing those college readiness standards are two things we don't have total control over, but must happen for this to work.
And the assessment meaning something like an end-of-course exam.
And that is in legislation.
Whatever the best practices is. I'm not sure that this is off the chart here or a sidebar here, but I'm not sure that a self-pace approach to that wouldn't be more effective than anything that smacks of teaching to the test will be uniformly unpopular. So I don't know. I'm not the educator. End-of-course exams, self-paced exams online that let them go on to the next learning unit.
Take it whenever,
or a combination thereof.
I never have understood why teachers don't want to teach to a test if it's a good test, but they don't.
All it takes is a catchy phrase, and that's all it takes to
What are
kill
you
something.
supposed to teach to? Teach to the college readiness standards.
Right.
How about that?
There you go. Any other questions for Janet? It was a great presentation.
Thank you.
We have two more items to get to before we can adjourn, so let's turn our attention to that. Item 2M is an update on the Texas Higher Education Accountability System, appropriately enough, and the presentation is going to be given by Debbie Perez.
Hi. Some of you may be familiar with the accountability system already. I'm just going to give a brief overview, and then at the end, I will tell you what we're working on with the peer groups for accountability. On this first slide, you'll see the basic introduction, which is that the governor mandated the accountability system in 2004, and in 2005, the community colleges came on board voluntarily to be part of the accountability system and to submit measures and definitions. It has been a collaborative effort, and it has had the participation and input of the university presidents and chancellors, as well as the community college presidents, as well as other different data groups that we work with around the state, such as the TARE data group and, any of the other.
It's the institutional researchers.
Right. On the next slide, you'll see the breakdown of the measures in primary groups, which includes participation, success, excellence, research, institutional efficiency and effectiveness, and patient care for the health-related institutions. If you'll go back to the last slide just a moment, I wanted to point out to you that participation and success were two of the measures that the institutions were involved in during the last accountability workshops that we had, and they were looking at the measures and definitions. With this session for this fiscal year, we've been concentrating on excellence. Thank you. The structure of the measures is really into three different groups. We have key measures within each of those groups: participation, success, excellence, and then we have contextual measures, which the institutions have broken down to provide more data beyond just what they believe is important for measuring that particular key group, if you will. And then we also have individual institutional explanatory boxes, which basically allows the institutions to go into the accountability system and indicate any other type of information they think is important, such as patterns and trends over the past few years or from last year, and they do use those individual boxes. On the next slide, you'll see the groups of the institutions. The universities are one group that includes the research, emerging research, which really are combined into one group. We have the doctoral universities, comprehensive, and the masters. And then we have the health-related institutions, the Texas State Technical Colleges and Lamar institutions, and then the community colleges are broken down into very large, medium, and small by size. The users of the accountability system, I think primary users are the legislature and the coordinating board staff when they look at different programs and look at the institutions and see what they're working on, how they're doing. The public is a user as well. I get phone calls from students sometimes doing research for dissertations and theses, and the institutions I know use them. In the accountability meetings, they talk about what each other are doing, because they do look at benchmarking themselves against each other. These next few slides, you'll see the actual accountability system as it looks like on the website. I will point out this allows you to key in on the first bullet, if you will, which is closing the gaps, and then you get all these other choices, and among those is the accountability system. So if you click on the accountability system, it pushes you forward. But in addition, there are other links from that main page to allow you to get to the accountability system. Once you get to the accountability system, there are a lot of parts to it. First, you can go to the interactive access to data, which allows you to pull down on the menu under type and select a certain type of university, health-related institution, or community college. At the top, you see the links that allow you to go into different parts of our website that allow you to look at different data for the institutions as well. Accountability history, the measures and definitions, which are basically PDFs for each of the groups that tells you how we define that measure and for that group.
One of the things I want to point out here is if you'll look, it shows the URS report. What we have set up is that if you are looking at an institution and they are doing very well in an area where one institution is not, they can click and go to the URS report, which is what that institution thinks are their best practices. So this is one of the ways that we're sharing that information, so that if an institution just on their own is looking at it, they can go look at the best practices from other institutions.
In addition to that, we have had staff from the URS area attend the accountability meetings and provide updates and just answer questions for the institutions when they come in for the meetings. On the left side of the screen, you can have the opportunity to pull down on your specific institution as well as statewide, and then press the go, and then you can see the reported data. Whereas on the right-hand side on the previous screen, it allowed you to identify a particular measure. You can print out a copy of the entire report, or you can print out a copy of just the section. For example, for participation, you can print out just that section. This pretty much just demonstrates to you that you can identify any of those measures and print out a copy of the report or that section. Thank you. Here's the link to the accountability system. I'm sure you all have it already bookmarked because you look at it all the time. And then I also wanted to end with letting you know that we're working on excellence measures. The institutions are really working hard to produce a report on how they would like, on the recommendation to redefine excellence, keep particular measures, add new measures, in addition to continuous improvement of the site for data as well as ease of use of the site. Any questions?
When will you incorporate those new measures? What's the plan for that?
The process we're going to follow is they're going to provide their recommendations from an institutional basis to their groups. For example, the doctoral group would introduce all of theirs and represent the doctoral group. And then for the universities, we're going to implement a vetting process to allow them to look at everyone that is in their group for universities, and then come up with a platform set. And so the process is going to be working through until probably about May, but we do plan to have a report for the committee, I believe, for the June meeting.
So we would have recommendations that would come forward for the June meeting if we do want to, if there are changes that we think need to happen, that sort of thing.
And one issue and one continuing issue is to limit the number of measures that are in here, because the tendency is to have hundreds of measures.
And this would be a switching out of measures.
And to make some real decisions.
It would not be a...
Yeah.
It would not be all new measures or additional measures. It would be a switching of measures, not a...
It already looks pretty daunting, so...
Yeah, and it's really, and actually I've talked to Susan, given your comment on that before, that maybe we need to, on the front pages, really just have the key measures and let people drill to the contextual, because it looks more daunting than it really is in terms of the key measures.
It's only about actually 17
contextual are meant to help institutions say, if they have a low graduation rate, to go to the next level and say, okay, well, we have a large number of part-time students, we have a large number of people with financial need. The things that at least give you some context for why that
I would
be.
encourage you to maybe put together a couple of focus groups, one with parents maybe, and one with legislative staff. Have them, if you set up a test model with these changes, have them drill through it and see how user-friendly it is.
Well, I think part of what you're talking about is something that we need to address, in that we have different audiences. And I think that the audience for parents and what they need to view is different than what legislators need or other institutions need in the parents. So I think having the different groups is a good idea. And I know at least one bill in terms of a report card really is addressed for a different group.
And one of the things, our IT department, I don't see anybody here, they are in the process of reviewing the entire website and to try and maybe have some focus there. And so hopefully, as they're doing that, we can
maybe use
there is a redesign of the College for All Texans website, which is student and parent focused.
Right.
And within that context, there will be ultimately in the second phase a different view of this as well. And with that first phase, have already been doing what you've said, and they've had focus groups with students and parents to make sure that the student design for students really is one that they understand.
Simplicity of design and homogeneity of design, I just don't think we have to be that different for legislative audience from parents and students.
Well, no, what I'm saying is they're interested in different issues. And I can tell you that from experience that the legislators will ask very different questions of this than the parents will.
I'm just saying that
but they both need simplicity. I'm not saying they don't need simplicity.
The appearance and the access of that information doesn't need to be different, even if they're looking for different information. I mean, I'm not a web design expert, but that's just my opinion. My other question was, will we have something in the new legislators briefing on the 21st of January about the accountability system?
We print out a PDF copy of the updated data for the legislature at the end of December, and that is our plan.
Well, I think we need to check with Laura, because we have done that in the past. I don't know if it's planned this time, but we should do it, because they need to walk through it. One of the best experiences we had was at one session after we first developed it. Somebody asked about something, and a legislator said, well, it's right here on the accountability system, and he turned it around and showed it to the other legislators. So we need to make sure that happens more often. And one reason was because I suspect we had actually shown his staff how to do it, and this legislator.
So you're saying we need a plant in the audience?
Yes, that's always helpful.
Well, we need to make sure that people know. I mean, the reality with everything we do is there's a turnover. There are new people, and you have to keep teaching people over and over again, and because they just haven't seen it before. One other thing I want to mention, because we haven't, it's reflecting what you're saying, but I think you should know that the board, when this was first adopted, wanted to make sure that we concentrated on improvement. And that's one thing we've been struggling with. It wasn't just a gotcha system. And I think what you've heard about is the attempt from staff in working with these individual groups to get them talking and working together. And I think really just in the past year have they begun, at least some of the groups, to really sit and take advantage of each other in reviewing the data and learning from each other. And I think, now that we have someone who's really focused on the accountability groups full-time, I think that's more likely to happen.
And I would have to agree, they've expressed their appreciation for that.
Well, you may have to hone up on your legislative testifying skills. You're the accountability expert now. It's an informational item only, so there's no action needed, but Elaine, you had another question?
Just another, not to add to the bazillion measures, but in the vein of what gets measured gets done, I would encourage us to take a look at, maybe it's in the URRS section, I don't know, but let's be able to give insight to all of us from these institutions as to what they're doing in the pipeline. What are their activities between pre-K and 5, 6 to 8, 9 to 12? Because if we keep, pretending like they're taking action in the pre-K to 12 system, or that they're taking most of the action in juniors and on seniors, we're missing the mark. And our 2020 numbers are going to look even worse. So, I don't know what kind of measurable.
The programs that they have in that where they are working with the P16 would be showing up in that URRS system. And so as they get into that.
It seems to need to bubble up as to, based on your comments about, demographics has changed, they haven't realized it, based on our participation rates and what the numbers are saying. We need to obviously bring that more to the forefront and have true accountability as to what's going on.
And related to, I mentioned to Raymond on the side that I think in terms of the regions, we probably need to develop a 2 or 3 page focus document in terms of the demographics and the connection to some things to send to all new regions when they come, in addition to what you're saying. It's a challenge to get the information out and to get people to focus on the right part. One thing I would mention that I don't believe you mentioned is that we know of at least one system that actually uses this accountability system in the evaluation of their presence too, Susan says now. So that's very positive. They used it as something they thought they could tie in directly to their own efforts, and so that helps reinforce it.
Definitely.
Excuse
Any
me.
further questions?
One question. I know that we want to measure improvement, but at some point, if you've suggested a goal to the university and it hadn't adjusted its target, shouldn't that show somewhere?
We will be looking at that
Okay.
when we get all the targets in. That's when we will go back and negotiate with them on how they.
Because I just think their target should be the goal. I don't see why there'd even need to be any discussion.
Well, we will be talking to them, and then we will be putting out that information for public consumption.
Not to extend the discussion further, but the HCR 159 Commission is talking about international goals and recognizing that closing the gaps only measures us against the other states, not necessarily what are worldwide best practices and expectations. So the next phase of closing the gaps will be a big jump.
And one word on the website. This maybe cost a lot of money, but if we could have some sort of more user-friendly keyword search, because we have all these weird names for things that nobody else knows.
on this one, or on just
on our
the general?
no, not on this one. On our general website.
I think they're taking that into account.
You're right.
I know they've heard it multiple times.
Yeah, because you even if you know the name of the document, unless you know it exactly, every article, you can't get it.
I agree. Sometimes I need help to find something.
Yeah.
Yes.
I have the phone number programmed in for the main web design person. Say, okay, where is this now?
I just called Susan. But that's a great point.
Yeah, it is a.
And if that doesn't cost a lot, we should really have that, because that goes all across your user groups.
And that is something I know that they're taking that into account or working on some part of that in this redesign. because they've heard it.
Thank you.
I wish
Thank you.
they would test it on us, because ever since I've been on the board, we have been
I will suggest that.
truly,
Can it
because
be voluntary?
we've been griping about it for
You have to be
years,
the guinea pig.
and we don't let us
Well,
at
the
it.
unfortunate thing is, it's been redesigned in the last couple of years, and there's still issues.
I know.
And with the use of focus groups and some various things, so I think one thing everybody has to realize is that you really have to focus on the development of those websites virtually on a daily basis.
I'm not
Keep
sure.
them up to date and have them as easy to use as they should be.
I'm not sure that when we redo the website, we make it simpler. I think we simply complicate it in another way.
I think that's right. I think that's right.
All right, the last agenda item is consideration of recommendation to the board of the annual evaluation report. And Robin Sunica is available, is making a presentation.
I'm right here. Yes, I'm presenting the annual evaluation report, program evaluation report. This is the first time that we have produced this document. And it's for the fiscal year 2008 programs, of which there are 33 programs broken down into 3 categories: pilot programs, standing programs, and basic research programs. It represents $87 million in coordinating board funding. Next. I want to start by looking at the overall recommendations that we are making in the annual report. There are really 3 to the coordinating board. One is identifying promising practices from pilot programs that can then be implemented at other sites and their effectiveness studied to see what's really making them successful and if they can be scaled up and replicated. Funding pilot programs for multiple years, and I'm going to talk about all these more in a little more detail in a minute. And then finally, monitoring project non-compliance and enforcing program requirements. To talk about the pilot programs and those recommendations, I want to look at 2 different pilot programs that we've been running at the board. The first one is the Texas Course Redesign Project. This one's still in progress, and so we're still conducting evaluation on different phases of this. But there are a couple of things that we have learned from the evaluation of these projects. One is that redesigned courses work best when they're taught by the people who actually redesigned them. When they try to replicate them with other faculty, they don't seem to have as good results as when they're being taught by the person who designed the course initially. And second, that community colleges are having a more difficult time reducing direct costs than other institutions through the redesign. So we're recommending on this program, one, that the staff seek promising models for disseminating successful course redesigns and implement those and study them further. And second, expanding the current cost model to include comparisons of savings due to course completion, increases in course completion, and increases in post-secondary persistence. And next slide to that.
May I ask a
Oops,
question?
this one's missing.
Robin?
Yes.
I have a question.
Sure.
Don't the data nationally show that in course redesign that there typically is not cost reduction in the first couple of years, startup years? It's really down the road where the savings are realized, because it takes a long time to get this stuff right.
That's true, because you've got a lot of development costs, and usually you have smaller enrollments in those initial pilot courses, so you're not seeing the savings from increased numbers. We think we can see more, though, about it by implementing some other cost modeling. We can use the same data that is being collected by NCAT, but we can apply some other metrics to it. So we can look at those total costs and look at that against increased course completion rates and increased persistence rates in post-secondary education, and see if it's having those other longer-term impacts on costs. One of the things that happens at the community colleges is that the NCAT model focuses, although it takes into account persistence and more course completion, their numbers, their quantitative analysis takes into account primarily a reduction in total costs due to either course size increase or using lower cost personnel. And that's where the community colleges especially get into trouble, because for the most part they don't have any lower cost personnel to shift the costs to. They are already using the lowest cost personnel that they have available. So they can't use that as a strategy initially to, or at any point really, to lower their costs. So we need to look at some other metrics for them to make sure that they are accomplishing their goals without, penalizing them for that.
But isn't there a
fact that they
differential in
can't.
terms of what type of courses taught? Hasn't there been more success with math in particular in terms of scaling up the size?
In our programs, it varies. Still depends on program.
In terms of what NCATE had done.
By scaling, you mean NCATE's numbers, scaling it up to
I forgot
size?
whether it's West Virginia or who that had very large rooms with essentially
You're talking
computer-assisted
about- yeah.
instruction, and they had tutors who, in some cases, were more advanced
You're talking
students.
about the, no, I can't think of it, but the Virginia Tech's Math Academy, Math Emporium. Thank you. Whoever said that. That's a really good model, and unfortunately, the ones that we're seeing so far that are trying to do that haven't been able. That's a very expensive model in some ways initially, because you have to have the space to do it, and you have to set a whole new structure to do it, and you have to convince all of the faculty and a whole program to do it. And some of them have tried, but so far we're not seeing anybody that's doing an entire Math Emporium.
And that's part of what I'm saying is I think that there's a, when you aggregate things, it washes out some differences. And my reading of some of the material from NCATE suggested to me that it was that type of program where you saw the significant savings, and with other programs, that the issue was an increase in learning.
Right, and we really need
have
to
a reduced cost, but the learning actually increased because of the changes.
And it takes time to monitor that and to gather the data on that, because it doesn't happen just in one semester.
Robin, I hate to rush you, but
That's okay.
cut this off, but we do want to hear
Yes.
the presentation, and we're running out of time.
Let me go on. I also wanted to look at the summer bridge programs. There we go. And we did learn some lessons by looking at programs. The evaluators that were working on this came up with a few things that were representative of successful programs. One, they designed an innovative curriculum specifically for their population rather than, for instance, using their existing developmental ed programs. They spent more time on task with the students, so they had traditionally a longer program. The successful programs averaged a minimum of 5.5 hours per day for 4 days a week, whereas some of the others would only meet 3 hours a day. They were well organized, and they had active and involved advisory boards. It was very important to have an active, involved advisory board, and even though that was emphasized in the RFPs, not very many of them did have a very active and involved advisory board. They had well-planned instruction and learning strategies, whatever that happened to be. And they embedded tutoring in some way. There's different ways of doing it, but all of the successful programs embedded tutoring in some way into the program. I want to look at one program in particular, Texas State University San Marcos paired math program, because it was so successful and because I think it tells us some things about what we can do if we can replicate this kind of model at other institutions to increase the success of these developmental ed students. They had a very strong advisory board, including the developmental education in the math department and faculty and administrators from across the campus, as well as the developmental ed in English language arts, even though they were focusing on math. It was a paired developmental math algebra 1 course with a science component and a learning strategies component. So they were applying the math as well, and they were looking at learning strategies. They had a tutoring center requirement for all of the participants, many of which said that they would have never thought to go to the tutoring center if they hadn't been required to, and now found it as an invaluable resource. And they were one of the programs that had a high time on task, with 5.5 hours per day spent on instruction 4 days a week for the 4-week period of the program. They had very good results. We did the THEA pre-post test, and their math scores had a large increase. The program itself accounted for 23% of this increase from our statistical analysis, which is very high. We also gave them the pre- and post-learning and study strategies inventory that looked at their ability to be good learners. It has 9 different scales, and there was a medium to large increase in all of the study strategies that were measured by that inventory for this group of students. One further point that I think you'll find very interesting is that they were putting students in a developmental math, and then they did college algebra, and if they were successful, they would actually finish college algebra at the end of the 4 weeks. 84% of the students in the program completed college algebra with a C or better.
Wow.
So that was a very successful program. We recommend, again, identifying practices like this, funding them at other institutions, seeing if they can be replicated and under what conditions, and studying their effectiveness. And then the board has already done this, but it's funding programs for multiple years so they can improve project design as they go, and also we have a better chance of studying them. So those are reasons why we wanted had those two recommendations. Non-compliance has been an issue as we have gotten more involved in evaluating the programs at the board. There have been some issues of project non-compliance with projects not meeting the requirements of the contract that was issued when they got the grant. And so we have broken down non-compliance into 3 areas. Programming, are they doing what they said they were going to do? Is it meeting the legislation and the requirements of the RFP? Evaluation, are they actually collecting the data and reporting it to us as we have required them to do? And then financial fidelity, are they spending the money the way that they're supposed to be, and are they submitting their financial reports? We have been looking at the board at standard consequences for when a project does not meet one or more of these fidelity requirements. We have also put together, as you'll see when you see the final hard copy report, the ability for our project directors to review past performance for a particular institution or program so that when they come before the board for funding again, they can go back and say, well, how has this institution been doing on terms of fidelity? Are they meeting the grant requirements on other grants that we have given them before they make a decision about funding another project at that institution?
Robin, how many of the 33 programs show some non-compliance?
There's some that are non-compliant in different areas. We have very few that have programming non-compliance. I think there's one big case that we have in front of us at the moment where the program didn't meet the criteria. And then we'll find smaller, 4 or 5 in a program, depending on how big the program is, where they're not meeting the requirements of presenting the data in a timely manner for the evaluation. And then occasionally we'll see somebody who's not filing their financial reports. It's not a large problem, but it's a significant problem in that we don't want them to think that we give you the money, you can just do whatever you want with it and not tell us about it.
The consequences are
We are in the process of coming up with standard consequences for different infractions. It's difficult because each case is a little bit different.
Yeah.
Yes.
That is one of them.
That was one of them.
That is one
We
of
are
them.
in the process with one institution of doing that.
There are lawyers on both things.
Yes. Okay.
Fairly small amount of money, I should say, but it's...
And in closing, I just want to say there will be an online version. Of course, the hard copy will be just an overview, but the online version will allow anybody to delve in deeper and look at specific projects in your region and a particular institution. So we look forward to having you look at it and any other questions you might have in the future.
Thank you, Robin.
Thank you.
Oh, that's right. This staff has recommended that the committee approve the report, or I guess for the board. So Chair will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Motion from Lynn and a second from Elaine. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Chair will entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved. Second.
A motion and a second from Brenda and Lynn. All in favor say aye and stand up.
Aye and stand. Oh, my God.
Move on to the next thing.
All right.
If any information budgets require legislation.
Evaluations are really important that we have ever done in full scale like this. I think it's important for the reasons you just heard. Also, so that if you have a project, it may largely work, but you find some things that with the next round of funding,